during that to take questions throughout the sessions. Please make sure your name that we see on Zoom is yours so we can take attendance for your pesticide recertification points. To get your points, you're going to have to be present for the whole session. So we'll be doing attendance for each speaker, and we'll be sending the receipts for your points out within the next couple of weeks. If you are a certified crop advisor, we do have CEU points available as well, and the QR code will be shown at the end of the day for that, and you can scan it with the app. That is different than your pesticide points. So if you are just here for your pesticide points, you don't have to do anything except make sure we see your name on the list. I think that is everything. Oh, we are going to be recording the sessions, and we hope to send those out at a later date if anyone wants to look back to go through those. The points will only be available to people that are here today for the live session, however. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is Mark Groen with Bayer Crop Science. He is the market development agronomist with Dekalb. So Mark, if you are ready to take it away, I'll let you share your screen and give the floor to you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. I'll share my screen here, and you just let me know if this is working correctly.
Yep, looks good.
Feel good?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thanks for the intro. My name's Mark Groen. Like Rebecca mentioned, I'm based out of Ottawa, Ontario. I have worked a little bit in your area in the past. I was lucky enough to cover that area for a couple of years, kind of in a junior role. These days, I see the earlier maturity products up in New Liskeard. Key difference being is when I used to go to your area, my supervisor would say, hey, Mark, maybe I'll tag along, and I do some work and he'd play golf. When I go to New Liskeard, he hasn't asked to come along yet. So there is definitely something special about your part of the world. But I've been asked today just to give a bit of an update on Dekalb genetics and what's new in our pipeline, but also just kind of give an update on some agronomics as well. So hopefully you find some value here that you can take home and consider on your own operations. My first slide here kind of highlights how corn works. So we have an independent agronomist in our area, and I saw yesterday on your speaker list that had Ken Ferry come. And Ken talked to us a lot about, breaking up corn into 4 main quarters or growth stages. And I find that this is something that's really helpful to have in the back of your mind when you're making management decisions in season and when you're thinking about a corn crop. So essentially the way corn works is from planting to V6, we're determining the number of kernels around. So the girth of the ear. From V7, so about 8 leaf, until the tassel stage, we're determining the actual length of the ear. And then from tassel to dough, we have tip dieback. So that's during pollination. I'm gonna have a picture that kind of shows that. And then at the very end of the season, that's when we're determining both our kernel weight and our kernel depth. So obviously in the early part of the season, we're thinking about things like planter performance. We're thinking about weed control. Nutrient uptake at that point is minimal, but very, very important. Each kernel row around, depending on the textbook you read, is worth kind of 3 or 4 bushel. So essentially what we're trying to do throughout the entire season is just keep that corn plant healthy. And at that planting time, we just want to make sure we're setting it up for success. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the season that we had here in Ottawa and kind of reflect on that this past year. I have a picture here. I'm at one of my corn plots looking at different hybrids. We had an extremely droughty year, and that drought carried through tassel. Much of the corn tasseled a week to a week and a half without receiving any rain, and it was dry before that already. So if we refer back to that previous chart that I just showed all of you, we'll remember that between the tassel and the dough stage, that's when we're determining the amount of kernels we're going to hold on to at the tip of the ear. So there's definitely factors, different factors at play there as far as fertility and available water, but hybrids also exhibit some differences. So you'll notice here that the hybrid on the left has more tip back than the hybrid on the right, which is holding onto those end kernels much better. So the one on the left would often be described as more of a racehorse hybrid. When you put it into those higher fertility situations, it has a very high top end yield, where the one on the right might not be quite as exciting in the larger data sets, but is a solid workhorse for the tougher ground or the droughtier soils. So just reflecting a little bit more on this past season, I guess everything has an impact. So this past year, much of our corn crop went in between the end of April to the middle of May, and the majority of it was actually in early May. Kind of interesting at that time is most of the corn went in at 6, 7, 8 degrees, where the textbook says that we're supposed to kind of wait for those 10-degree soil temps. There's a couple of reasons that our crop, I think, went in so early in these borderline conditions. Number one being in 2019, we had an extremely wet spring and we could not get on our fields. Much of the crop didn't go in until the middle of June and even into the end of June. And then we actually had a fairly cool season after that. And we really struggled with grain quality and test weight at the end of the year because we had that late planting along with the cool year. So I think guys were pretty anxious to, get the corn out of the bag into the ground. Some people, smarter than myself, kind of made the astute observation that, it's growing in the field, not in the bag. and they are right. But I think in some cases we might have just pushed it a little too hard. Management certainly made a difference. For some folks, they had some great results with their early planting, but for other folks, it didn't kind of turn out the way they wanted, and there's many spring field calls. And what we were looking at for the most part is this small picture in the bottom left labeled chilling. What we're seeing here is typical kind of textbook chilling injury. And that happens when the seed's taking in water at soil temps less than 10 degrees. Essentially, there's no elasticity in the cells and they just shred and it corkscrews out and that plant dies. But what we saw is small difference in management and field conditions made massive differences this spring. So on the top left there, I have a picture. It's labeled extra passive tillage on the headland. That was a field call and we were checking it out. And we noticed variability in the crop as well as missing plants, and it was largely due to chilling. But on the headlands, I believe the extra passive tillage he did there helped warm up the soil just a little bit more, and that's why we saw a more vigorous stand there and a more even stand. In the bottom middle picture, there's a very compacted, tight field. The tile lines showed up very clearly. That's the only spot where the corn looked halfway decent. Like I mentioned, many of these fields were fit in terms of conditions early on. The soil was just cold. Just because many of them were fit, that doesn't necessarily mean all of them were fit. So this field, I think it had some pre-existing issues from the previous year in terms of compaction. He did some very light surface tillage and then followed it up with his planting. And just based on the clumping that we're seeing in the bottom right there, that field was a little bit too wet. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out to have great results. On the top right there, you'll notice it's labeled 2 inches on the left where the corn crop's coming up and 1 inch on the right. This is an example where we were going to do a plot and that ground's a little bit heavier. dropped the planter in the field, started driving, checked the seeding depth, and it turned out to be a little bit shallow. So we corrected that, went to 2 inches, and kept going. When we visited a couple of weeks later, this is what we saw. And I think this just highlights the importance of things like seeding depth. When I was first being trained, I was told, Mark, you got 3 options for seeding depth. Those options are 2 1/4 inches, 2 1/4 inches, and 2 1/4 inches. Try not to forget. And that's one thing even I've managed to remember. The reason we're kind of shooting for 2 1/4 inches is because we have a more stable environment at that depth with corn. We have better soil moisture. We tend to get better seed to soil contact. And end of the day, what's really important with corn is a picket fence stand. So just looking more at this past year, you can see there that I have a picture in the bottom right with 3 different corn plants in my hand, and they're at slightly different stages. So in corn, like other crops, we have general rules of thumb. What this picture is highlighting is that if a corn plant comes up a leaf stage behind its neighbor, at the end of the season, that corn plant will only put on half an ear. So we've lost 50% of our potential there with that plant. The picture on the far right, the seed on the far right, it was about 2 leaf stages behind the neighbor. General rule of thumb says that plant will not put on any kind of ear at the end of the season whatsoever. And for all intents and purposes, it's a weed. So I'm just going to run through some quick math, and I think it might give you something to think about. Say you put down 35,000 plants at planting, and you lose kind of between 2 and 5% because of germ. That's fairly standard. And then you lose another 15% because of some other issue. It could be one of many things that we've kind of alluded to already. It could have to do with seed chilling. It could have to do with shallow planting. It could be row cleaners not set up correctly, like that picture shows in the top left. It could be an open seed trench from the closing wheels not being set up correctly. Whatever it may be, all of a sudden we're down to 28,000 or so final plants per acre. Then we take in this viable ear concept. If we have 1 or 2 plants that are a collar stage behind their neighbor, or sorry, a leaf stage behind their neighbor, and if we have 1,000 or 2,000 plants that are 2 leaf stages behind their neighbor for every acre, before you know it, you're down to 25,000, 26,000 plants per acre. Someone once told me that about 85% of your yield is determined at planting. I think regardless of what kind of percentage you assign it, there's no question that we're really setting the foundation at planting. So doing a good job is important. Here's a picture that's a whole lot less depressing. Believe it or not, this was another field call for someone who was a little bit concerned. Everyone has slightly different in standards and expectations, but it was certainly valid that he did call us, and he was picking up on the same thing that we saw in a lot of other fields this year, and that was just variability in his crop and missing plants. And again, that had a lot to do with seed chilling. But for the most part, his crop was healthy, it was vigorous, and it was fairly well set up because he'd done so many other things right. That picture on the left, that's a picture of roots from his field. These are like textbook perfect roots. They're going down at about a 35-degree angle. There you've got soil very well attached to them. And beneath the surface there, those roots are white and healthy. So when we were running into the rest of the season, we were running into the rest of the season, he had great potential. And we told him, you know, and I think he already knew this, don't give up on this crop. There's still lots of potential here because you've done so many things right. And this is what we ran into later in the season. Extreme drought. We got very little rain in June. We got essentially nothing in July, a couple sprinkles at the end. And then I guess this is just my question to you, and it's a bit rhetorical, but what root system would you rather have going into that part of the season? For sure, you'd want the one on the bottom right, like that grower had that I referenced. Because when you're running into, you know, tassel and you're short on water, you want the best root system you can possibly have. I guess just in closing on that concept, this is what I was referencing earlier on. In that left-hand picture, that plant that produced that kind of not so great looking cob, it was about a leaf stage behind its neighbor. So that's the difference there. And then on the right, I had some pictures of what to me this past year was a great stand of corn. And you can see there that we have some tip back and not everything's perfect, but they did a lot of other things right in terms of their management, and they still had some great yields for our area this year. So I guess hindsight's 2020, right? If we could have put all the corn in on May 15th, that would have been the perfect day, because that's when the weather turned around and actually got warmer. That being said, I mean, it's not feasible to expect us to put the whole crop in one day, and we also don't know what the weather's going to do. I guess just my comment is we got to try to be smart about the risks we're taking. So this past year, the major challenge was cold injury. But you know, if you're going to go in early, think about going into well-drained fields, ones without heavy trash and that type of thing. There's a little background noise. Is there a question there or no? I'll assume not. I'll keep rolling here. I guess if you have a Dekalb seed guide, you'll have noticed that there are some new products in your area. I'm not going to get too in-depth into them today. I think Truro can for sure answer your questions on them, and we can talk about it more. But we have 2136, 2406, 3185, 3337, and 3537 that I think are most applicable to you folks. Little difference there is where many of our crop products right now are very much focused on test weight. These ones are focused more so on yield. We also have a couple of products that might interest you that aren't in the seed guide but are available in small commercial quantities. Number one is 3686, which I saw doing very well in productive ground. It definitely suffered from tip back, so I'd avoid droughty dirt. Lighter test weight, and to me it looks like a great candidate for silage for you guys, and we'll be doing more testing on that as well. The other one is 3815, which is Tricepta traded, excellent test weight. Stalks are a little bit weaker, similar to 3855, which you might be familiar with, and it performs well across all yield environments, and we'll evaluate the silage potential on it. As far as the Tricepta trait, the Tricepta trait is basically, it's our double pro trait platform with the addition of the Viptera. And Viptera is targeting Western bean cutworm, but it also provides us protection against black cutworm, as well as an additional mode of action on fall armyworm and corn earworm. So right now it's on that 3815 product, but we'll see this trait continue to flow down through the lineup and hit even more products in your maturity over time. Soybeans. I'm going to touch on one brief concept today, and that's planting soybeans early. This is a picture of a plot that I did. We went in there on May 6th. We decided to do this particular operator I work with. He has a lot of acres to do himself. He has a lot of customer for other folks, and he likes to do plots with us, so he's an extremely busy fella. We decided to do his soybean plot this day. Soil temps were a little bit cold. The soil was borderline. It was a little bit tacky, but we decided to go in and see what happens. There was definitely some variability in the stand that came up, but that's not nearly as important with soybeans as it is with corn. We don't require that picket fence stand. We don't require everything to be at exactly the same stage. So these pictures of the crop, they were taken around June 19th. At that point, a lot of the beans are at the V2 stage, pushing V3. they're beginning to nodulate and produce their own nitrogen, and they just take off from there. One more picture based on the same concept. First picture, aerial photo, beans on the right planted early May, beans on the left planted early June. Definitely big differences in where the crop is at. Early May crop, much more even germination just because of the available water in the soil. And heading into that droughty period, it's much closer to having its rows closed than the crop on the left. Planting early, we generally recommend to pick a variety that's a couple hundred heat units longer than what you would normally plant. And the whole idea is to close the rows as we move into the summer. It's to extend the flowering window. If we can extend the flowering window, hopefully we get more pods. And then with August rains, some fantastic yields. So this picture on the right is from near the end of July. Beans are definitely a bit of a funny crop. Rows still aren't closed there, and it wasn't the most fantastic looking field, but yeah, by golly, I mean, if you get the rains in August, that's what makes beans. But I think the same concept applies to beans as it does with corn. It's just trying to set things up right. I'm going to touch on a few varieties that I think you folks might be interested in. This first variety, it's not in the seed guide. It's called DKB 00848. It will be available in some quantities by request if you chat with Truro. This particular variety, I kind of see it as a 2510 replacement. It's slightly behind the 2510s in maturity, but it has improved yield, disease package, and standability. And at the same time, it has stature that's more or less equivalent to 2510. So in this particular part of the lineup, we've had some shorter varieties in the past that can certainly put on some big yields, but sometimes, you know, stature is wanted just because it can be a little bit easier to pick up in the fall. So these pictures were taken on the same day by two different people. You can see there on the left, the 2510s are lodging, and they were picking up some white mold. This field is extremely high fertility. White mold can be a concern in this spot, particularly this season up north in New Liskeard. So it's a great plot to measure standability and disease tolerance. So they are lodging some for sure and picking up some disease. The 00848s are on the right. They're not lodging nearly as badly, and they were looking a lot cleaner too. So based on the conditions in that field, we were very happy with what we saw. And I think this is a bean that's gonna be very suitable for you guys. Next bean, also not yet in the seed guide, but available on request. It's called DKB 00-20. This particular bean demonstrated excellent emergence and vigor, absolute rocket out of the ground where I saw it. I think it's one that's going to be best suited for no-till and tougher conditions, and certainly adaptable to all row widths. It is one that I saw pick up a little bit more white mold. So I would just say, you know, consider the placement. Like I said, best suited for no-till and tougher conditions, and you place it there, and I think you'll have a great day. Last bean I'm going to touch on today is the DKB 03-25s. This is a medium height bean with excellent standability. If you're familiar with 2712s, this bean would be a couple of inches shorter, but not really short. This one has excellent white mold tolerance. It's adaptable to all row widths, soil types, and tillage types. Yields very competitive with 2610s and 0441s, which are in the exact same maturity range, but the extra height makes it easier to combine. So this is one where in the past we've used some 2610s and 0441s in your area and had some nice results. But the feedback we have received from some individuals is that they can be tough to pick up in the fall because they're so short. And I think that's where this bean comes in. Like I said, it's just a couple inches shorter than something like a 2712, so certainly some extra height to it. And at the same time, it is very competitive with 2610s and 0441s. Excuse me. You can see there a few bushels on the 2610s, about a bushel or so on the 0441s, and it even edges out our 2712s although it's very close. So there's just a couple of pictures of the 0325s, medium height, fairly branchy variety with pretty productive branches. Obviously, they'll look a little bit different from field to field, depending on row widths, planting populations, fertility, so on and so forth. But what I like about this variety is just its adaptability. I'll certainly be positioning it across a number of acres this year and into the future. Something else that I was asked just to touch on briefly today is Extend Flex. This is where we are headed in the Dekalb lineup down the road. We will be testing out some Extend Flex varieties in Ontario this year. So the difference between these beans and our Extend beans is we're going to have the ability to spray glufosinate on these beans down the road. Right now, just as far as the Extend system, you can spray dicamba and glyphosate. For your dicamba applications, we recommend pre-plant up to the V2 stage. That way, we're avoiding drift to sensitive crops. And at the same time, we're getting excellent weed control of small weeds, as well as taking advantage of residual. As always, we have some local trials planned with Truro and other maritime dealers this year. You know, local data, I think, is very important. Products can act slightly differently in different areas. So I think it's very, very important to have these local trials. So we're thankful to Truro for making them happen. And that's it for me. Thanks for having me today. I'm not sure if any questions did come up in the sidebar. You're muted, Rebecca.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark. Is there any questions if anyone wants to put in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question as well? While we're waiting, if anyone has questions, they can keep them coming, but just wanted to thank Mark, and we, instead of trying to ship you something as a thank you gift for today, we will be making a donation to the Nova Scotia We Talk, We Grow mental health campaign that has just been recently launched for mental health initiatives in agriculture in our province. So we'll be making a donation to that initiative in your honor to thank you for your time today.
That's excellent. I'm happy to hear that. That's way better than a bag of swag to me. So yeah. Thanks for having me today.
Great, thanks again. And if there are no questions, we'll just hold on for a few moments. We're a few minutes to 2. That's when our next session will start. So we'll just give it a couple minutes in case there's other people coming on for that session. And we'll be back in a moment. Thanks again, Mark.
Thank you. We'll see you.
All right, so we've got Eric lined up here. I'll just take, Eric, if you want to get your slides, you can share your screen, and I'll just do a quick intro. There might be a couple new people that just popped on, so just really quickly, a few rules. If you can keep yourself muted for the duration of the session, unless you'd like to ask a question. In that case, you can raise your hand using the raise hand feature that's at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll give you a chance to unmute yourself and speak, ask your question, or you can submit questions by the chat box as well. We do ask that if you can change your name, to please change it to your full name so that we know who you are to record for pesticide points. If you're having any issues with that, just send me a direct chat or text one of us here. Just let us know. We'll make sure we get you recorded. If you are a certified crop advisor, we will have points available at the end of the day. We'll put the QR code up and you can scan it with the app. I think that is mostly it. I will let you know that we are recording the sessions so that they can be distributed later on if anyone wants to go back and look through anything. The points, however, will only be given to people that are present today for the live session. So with that, I'll call on Eric. Eric Richter joins us today from Syngenta. He's our premium sponsor for today's sessions. He has a long history of experience as an agronomist and a researcher. So he's got a wealth of information to share with us today. So Eric, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Rebecca. So can you see my screen right now? What I've done, I've loaded up the Moddus presentation in the full screen view.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. I think what I'll do with this one, we'll go first through this session, maybe just take just a couple minutes. I'll exit out and load the second one. Each one's about half an hour. So before I go into the first presentation though, I'd like to just take a minute and thank Turo Agrimard and Alana, Allison, Rebecca for helping put this together. And we're certainly glad to present and also sponsor this part of the session. So what we've been trying to do, I am the rep for Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia, and certainly COVID has created some challenges, but I'm here to service and support Turo and yourselves. And one of the areas that we're focusing on is in cereal production. There's about 250,000 acres there of cereals, from winter wheat, spring wheat, winter barley, spring barley, oats, even rye, significant acres. And our goal is to help growers grow a better crop. And it is interesting with cereals, certainly here on the island, it almost really got to a point where you'd consider cereals as a rotation crop. The perception was that we really couldn't make money from cereals, and it was surprising to me when I moved to the area and started working with growers, and truly believe that there is potential, but it does really take a systems approach. And that's what we want to talk about today with my presentations. And then you'll hear from Peter Johnson here later as well. So I start first with our Moddus presentation. We're launching with a new plant growth regulator. And what I'd like to cover is just talking simply about lodging, of course, and how it impacts you as cereal growers. The introduction to Moddus, a bit of a technical review, some stories, including some local stories. And then what we'll do, I have Q&A on there, Rebecca, but I think, again, what we'll do for time, Peter and I talked about this just to try to make it so that it's sort of smooth flowing. Please take a minute. If you've got a question, refer to the slide that I'm on and write your question down, and we'll tackle all these questions at the back end, okay? Hoping that works the best for everybody. But certainly we look at cereal crops and they are different. You know, certainly one of the challenges is as we start to move that needle forward and apply more management, try to push for higher yields, lodging almost always raises its ugly head, regardless of which crop cereal species we're working with. But reduced yield, reduced quality, enhanced disease, harvest challenges, and so on. For all those that have experienced that and know full well what I'm referring to here. But Lodging is the real nemesis as we try to move forward in the cereal production program. And at the end, growers will try harder and end up with, in many cases, lower profits. It's a bit of a been there, done that, not doing it again. And I think it is important to look at your lodging risk. Not all fields are created equal, nor growers and their current production systems, but yield potential of the variety, yield potential of the field, the genetics, that component, not all varieties, again, created equal for standability, planting rates, and we'll hear more about this, that as we try to push for higher yields, we're typically at the higher planting rates for spring cereals, or we're trying to encourage tillering and get that maximum head density, all leaning towards more lodging risk. Also in the system, we talk about enhanced fertility, a bigger factory, bigger plant, bigger canopy, and that in turn becomes higher risk of lodging. The system, it goes without saying that we are going to talk here about nitrogen management, whether you're applying commercial product or manure or combinations, and also the carryover N credits from previous crops or cover crops. But the goal still, taking into account lodging, is to help growers grow the best possible crop of cereals. So a quick introduction to Moddus. It is a plant growth regulator, and it really, these products allow growers to push that yield envelope, keep the crop standing and aid in harvestability. Keep it standing, keep it clean. And personally, I feel the plant growth regulators have been the missing piece. I've talked with many cereal growers that have, tried increasing seeding rates, or they've tried to increase fertility rates, particularly nitrogen, or applying a fungicide. Some have tried some different combinations, but in many cases, even when they have captured some synergies, at the end of the day, they've increased lodging and often no net bottom line profit, just more headaches. So that piece up on that right side is very critical when we build the system. And Moddus itself is a plant growth regulator. It inhibits or reduces cell elongation, but at the same time, it allows the plant to thicken stem wall or the pipe. I call it the pipe, which in turn helps to mitigate risk. So two things, it impacts height, reducing it, and strengthening the stem or the pipe, the cell walls. And that in turn helps us with this lodging, reducing the risk of lodging. There's the active ingredient. We look at it now with registration for wheat, both winter and spring, barley, both winter and spring, and then for oats. I'm going to zip through some of these slides, maybe a bit technical here. Probably I just think it's more value to share some of the stories with you. But our application rate around that 0.83 liters per hectare. You can see that on oats and spring wheat, we're slightly lower in the active per acre. Winter wheat and barley takes a slightly higher rate, but still the most important message here with Moddus and the plant growth regulators is timing. Growth stage 30, 32, and I'll explain this here in a minute, but it's very important. I want to emphasize with the plant growth regulators and Moddus in particular, we're really better to be too early than too late to capture the most value out of this product. Again, I try to reinforce we're better to be too early than too late. And we'll touch on this here, and then also we'll probably circle back later on with the system. But in terms of what we're trying to do, I mentioned about height reduction, but also the strengthening of the stem. This is a great analogy. When I first saw it, I said, yeah, this makes sense. You think of the fishing rod concept where the strength of the rod at the base end is there, but at the tip, we have that flexibility. And you look at the schematic that's there with the growth stage 30 to 32, and that blue bar is down near the base. So we delay application to the growth stage 33, 35. And that would be beyond when it starts to elongate. We've got the second node now moving up. Look where we've strengthened the stem. We still have height reduction. And look where we delay it to the point where it's growth stage 37, 39, 40 perhaps. All we're really doing is impacting primarily the height of that stem and not really capturing any benefit whatsoever in the strengthening of the straw itself. So this slide here, just want to focus right in the middle. This is our single application at growth stage 30-32. We are registered for a split, and let's leave that one for now. But for growers that are further up the management system, there is an opportunity here to do a split, but we're saying one app, whether it be winter wheat or spring barley, oats, one app, and at that growth stage 30, earlier is better than later. Here's some great pictures here, just again showing what growth stage 30 looks like. 31, as we see here, I'll use my cursor instead of pointing on the screen, I apologize. Growth stage 31, we've got the first node right there visible. This would be the ground surface at the crown, pushing upwards. Growth stage 32 is simply that. There's our first node. Now we start to see the second node. And this is when your cereal crop, whether it be wheat, barley, or oats, really starts to shoot up. You've got that dense canopy, but you can see the growth almost on a daily basis. But this picture here does tell the story. Hopefully you can see it okay. On the bottom there's two stems here. The bottom one will be a field treated with Moddus, and the top stem will be untreated. And these markers, the first one indicates where the first node is here treated. Second, you can see they're both lined up essentially at the soil surface. There's our first node. There we are with the treated. Now we've got second node. We've managed to reduce that cell elongation. Here we are even with third, but second and third node in the non-treated, you can see how that stem is very much stretching up. And at the end of the day, there will be a measurable and noticeable height difference between these two. It is also important, though, to look at other environmental factors at application time. If the crop is stressed, we're going to try at this point to discourage the application of a growth regulator. Your crop will be typically shorter. And in terms of where and what fields, I mentioned earlier about the fertility, high producing fields, those are prime candidates. Soils that have good water holding capacity, same thing, good candidate fields. Too dry, too cold, those are watchouts. Too dry and too cold. And if the soil is waterlogged, again, stress conditions encourage growers to pull back and typically hold off on the application of their Moddus. But where we see the best results would be under normal to good growing conditions. That's what we're trying to do, is keep that crop moving right along, but reducing that lodging risk ultimately. So some examples, whether it be, some of these are from Western Canada. These are aerial shots. On the left, we've got treated and untreated. Again, left will be untreated, treated on the right with Moddus. That's a barley shot. The wheat field on the right, untreated on the left and treated on the right. Visually, you can see the lodging and also the yield bump as a result, not only of the ease of harvestability and so on, but also there is a yield bump from the Moddus itself, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Moving from west to east, some trials out of Ontario, again showing very similar patterns, different genetics, but these were shots that I've taken here on the island. And certainly here with the maritime climate, we're often plagued with the summer rainfall events, again, being fairly storm-like or violent with some significant winds. And very quickly you can take just an awesome looking cereal crop and have it flat on the ground. Now, these are both what I would characterize as later season lodging. Maybe not as impactful on yield, but early season lodging, let's say at heading time, extremely detrimental to yield. So when the lodging occurs, can have an influence on the yield impact, the negative yield impact, but regardless, lodged grain is certainly no fun to harvest, and it does have an impact ultimately on yield and profitability. This was one of our trials in 19, side by side. We did some drone imagery, and this field now on the right was untreated. And we had just over 25% of the field significant lodging. This was spring wheat. But at the end of the day, that grower between the Moddus and the stacked program ended up with almost 0.4 metric ton per acre additional yield from the left side, higher yielding, to the right side, lower yielding. Moddus is just made for crops like oats. You know, some of the spring wheat varieties, some of the oat varieties certainly are not known for their standability. It is a challenge in those systems to keep them standing right through to harvest. This was a crop this last year on the island with oats, over 2 metric ton per acre, and right to the line, you could see where it was treated and untreated. Significant height difference. The left side picture shows treated again on the left with Moddus. Non-treated in that picture was on the right side. And this, in fact, was my own crop, 18 spring wheat on the left, and 2020 spring wheat, yes. So on the left side picture, it's Moddus 2018, and the Moddus was applied on the right side of that picture. You can see the line that I've drawn across that image. So this was the Moddus treated and non-Moddus. Significant height reduction followed by extremely dry weather through the month, particularly of July. And this was 2020. There's the flag right in the middle. No Moddus on the right side, Moddus on the left. And again, a significant difference there in standability. This was lodged at about 25%, and this was lodged upwards of 75%. Interesting with some of the growth regulators here, Moddus I'm talking about, we do see a yield bump, which is interesting. It's not the primary reason that a grower would be using the growth regulators. I say it's more for canopy management and keeping that the crop standing. But this is a positive that we see out of it. And again, Peter will probably get into this a bit more. I know you touched on it in the other presentation, but there is a yield enhancement. We see greener crop. Why do we see this yield bump? There's a number of physiological reasons. Remember, the growth regulator doesn't stop the plant from growing. It allows it to repartition, assimilates the photosynthase to different parts of the plant. So it keeps growing, and we often see enhanced roots, darker green color, these types of things would seem ultimately in many cases to enhance yield as well. But at the end of the day, it's important to remember the plant growth regulator, Moddus, we're really trying to manage the risk, the lodging risk itself. And the application of Moddus is built on the other best management practices, parts of the system. So it's not a magic bullet, but it's sort of that final piece in the puzzle that I talked about, allowing you to shorten the height of the crop and thicken the stem at the same time. So where does it fit for Nova Scotia growers? It's really an excellent fit for those fields that you've got that are conducive for high yields already. And you want to practice this high input regime and maximize profitability. Those are perfect candidates for a product like Moddus to be applied. For growers that have experienced lodging, and I see this on the island, been there, done that, tried that. So they've tried to grow the best possible crop, push their cereals, it ends badly, very serious lodging, harvest challenges, and just I'm not doing that anymore. Didn't make any money, cost me more money to harvest, and so on and so on. These are candidates, I think, that have pulled back on their agronomic inputs for the cereal crop to mitigate lodging. And as a result of that, cereals just simply have become a rotation crop because they can't capture any additional profit that might be there. The early adopters, growers looking to harvest, efficiently. And I think also the group that has livestock manure. And I say this because many growers, of course, that have applied livestock manure, it is a challenge to get uniform coverage and at the rate desired. So there are areas often that have a little bit excess fertility, and Moddus would be a great product again to try to minimize that lodging risk in those areas. So just in summary, it's not a new product. We've used it for a number of years. I say 20 years here. Well accepted in the turf industry as well. If you want a nice green lawn and not have to cut it as often, that's where the product was first used. As I say, it doesn't stop growth. It doesn't inhibit that plant from photosynthetic activity. It's a gibberellic inhibitor, and as a result, both reduction in the height of the stem and thickness of the pipe. We've had a number of trials in the Maritimes. We've had trials across Canada and globally. The product works, and it is interesting. As I say, it is designed for those growers really wanting to maximize their cereal production system. And I'll finish with that as the Moddus presentation. I'm going to jump out here. Okay. I'll come back in and let's see. So remember, save your question. Where's my?
You want to do the questions at the very end, Eric?
Yes.
After?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. No problem. We'll sit on these.
There it is. See if this works. I'm just trying to get the other presentation up here. Yeah, it's still showing Moddus. Okay. Show all windows. It should be here. You know what I'll do? I'll close the other one out here. There, I'll close that. Okay. Here we go. This should work. Share screen. Uh-oh, where is it now? Huh, I don't see it. Ah, there it is, right there. Okay, this is better. Sorry about that, everyone. Just give me a sec. It seems slow. I was upstairs in my office there this morning and I had wood stove going and I think my iPad gets a little warm and apparently they slow down when they get hot. So I'm trying to just pull this up into the slideshow format. And Rebecca, what's it looking like on your end?
Looks great.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the second part. How am I doing on time? Ah, not bad. Our goal, Peter and I talked about this. We want to make sure there was lots of time for questions, but this part of the presentation, truly excited. This is where it sort of all comes together for the grower. I started at this when I came onto the island in 18 and started working here in 19, talking about the Syngenta stack cereal program. And the takeaway message here is, as I said earlier, there are growers, many on the island, particularly that were growing cereals almost as a rotation crop. And I just heard over and over again, you can't make any money from cereals. And, you know, the genetic potential there to do so much more. We did those series of meetings last February and Peter attended those with us. And we talked about, you know, where the average yields currently. And that gap between genetic potential and current yields, whether they be in Nova Scotia or where else in the Maritimes, there's a tremendous opportunity to move the needle forward. The genetics is there to grow a bigger crop. But it is a tough environment to grow cereals, and I'll explain. And it is really about the system. And I'm not going to talk about some of these components. Peter will touch on this, but whether you're growing a crop of soybeans or corn, it really is about genetics first. There's no perfect varieties. Sell the NK brand, and I've said that since the first day I started in sales in 1994. It's very important to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of a variety, whether it be a winter wheat variety, an oats or soybean or corn, but it does start with genetics first. That's so critical in your production system. Again, whether it's cereals or other crops, planting early to capture that sunshine, full canopy, maximize interception and grow the big crops. It really is truly about getting planted early. June planted cereals don't work. Even May planted, late May. Try your darndest to move that planting date to, or as early as you can. Peter, we talked about frost seeding, these types of things. Winter wheat, clearly early planting still is one of the secrets. But not just planting early, but the optimum seeding rate. I remember coming onto the island and walking barley and spring wheat fields and thinking, wow, I can see the ground. You know, this doesn't seem right. There's only half a crop here. And you get seeding rates, you know, we talk again about heads per square foot. You count up, you get 20 heads per square foot. Well, Peter will touch on that. But optimum seeding rate is very critical. Treated seed. The fertility program to unlock genetic potential and grow big crops. We cannot do that on just residual fertility. We really do need to at least accept that replacement strategy is the starting point for a fertility program. But I leave that to Peter. What I'd like to focus on as part of the Syngenta story with the stacked cereal program is canopy management, in particular fungicide application at T1 stage and T3. Along with Moddus, excuse me. Two sayings that I want you to just sort of keep in the back of your mind and resonate as it goes, we'll go through this one and also with Peter. Green heads, green leaves, and keep it standing. So shots from the Maritimes. I was born in Nova Scotia, and that's one of the things that moved away when I was 5 years old, and I still remember the foghorn, the fog. And we move on to the island. Yep, here at Rollo Bay, same thing. How many mornings the fog hangs around until 10, 11. That leaf wetness index is something that certainly from a disease management aspect, you need to keep in mind. But how many mornings look like this at 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning? A lot of them in the Maritimes. I put this slide together. It really is about, you'll see here in the center, it is about the plants and heads per square foot, could be per square meter, what have you. We look at head size and then the spikelets or florets, if it's oats. Peter, we talked about this one on the other call, but it ends up being kernels and test weight per square foot. That's what you get paid on. That's what you're trying to grow and maximize. But you look at these pictures and it really starts to make you think about it. What is that upper limit? What is the optimum and what is the upper limit? This slide you may have seen before, it's not mine. One of Peter's cohorts, Phil Needham, I've heard him speak, you know, keep the flag leaf green, and we need that to fill the head. Really, we do need healthy green tissue to maximize yield. And so this is right here, flag leaf, one leaf, 40% plus of yield from that one leaf. The other part is the head. We'll get almost a quarter of our crop coming from that head. Between those, 65, 70%, one leaf in the head, keeping them green. We lose them, boom. There's no way that we're gonna maximize yield and profitability. So here's some shots, green heads, green leaves. It was really funny as I started walking on the island. Again, some barley. This is what I'd see on the island. I see it all over. And then the valley, you walk in, you see green heads, dead leaves. And you ask the grower, the first thing the grower says, well, it's been dry. But when you really dig into it, Peter said this to me one day. He said, Eric, you realize where wheat originated from? Well, it sure wasn't in the Maritimes and our maritime climate. It was exactly the opposite. And so, yes, we need water to grow big crops. I absolutely accept and understand that. but there's a lot of drought tolerance, so to speak, that's there inherently in some of these crops. And when you see them dead in the middle of July and your lawn is green, something's not right with the cereal crop. If your lawn is dead, I understand that. I use the lawn as a bit of a drought indicator, but I digress. I'm sorry. So one of the things I talked about is T1 fungicide application. We cannot bring dead tissue back. And it is so important in cereals to stay ahead of the game. Once we start to see disease creep in, it is really hard with particularly the disease triangle and the weather effect. If the weather goes against us and the disease is there, it is a real job to even just stay ahead of it. So Trivapro is a big step up from where we were with Tilt. We've got the propiconazole, and then we've added in the Strobi, which was Squadris, and then the new active that we were excited about is Solatinol. And those three in combination, we put that in that T1 spray in your winter wheat field. You can go out with the Moddus, no problems. And that will carry us pretty well through to flag leaf. And I give you some pictures here. These, I apologize again, these were from the island, but a lot of growers were using Bumper, a generic knockoff, and they were using even half rate. And I said, save your $5. If you're not going to spend, 15 at that point, the $5 is not going to do the job. And so the center plant, right, is Trivapro, left is Bumper, left is Bumper over on this, and on the far right is Trivapro. Again, our goal is to try to keep tissue green and healthy, and particularly this flag leaf. So I moved from T1 now to T3 heading. And this is the really exciting product, the brand new launched last year. Thank you to those growers that had tried the product. But it is a new active called Adepidin, and it is a premix with a propiconazole. But what we're targeting, two things. We're not only just applying here at heading for fusarium head blight suppression, but we're also a dynamite product for leaf disease. So we keep that head green and the flag leaf and canopy green and healthy, and protect against fusarium. So maritime climate, I mentioned that, not every year it raises its ugly head, but I've seen horrendous crops impacted with fusarium, and it's a sad case. I've grown spring wheat now on the island since 2007, and I've not missed milling 1 year. Now, I've not used Miravis Ace, obviously, but I believe strongly in a T3 spray, whether it be spring wheat, winter wheat. It's not only about, as you say, keeping the plant healthy, but also this fusarium risk is real and significant for maritime growers. The timing is not any different per se than some of the other sprays that are currently registered, but timing is better, again, too early than too late. Peter will touch on this a little bit, but these pictures talk about the optimal timing here before we really see any significant amount of anthers on that wheat head or, excuse me, or that wheat head. So this is just an aerial shot, again, talking about fusarium, but also alternaria. We see growers that have applied Miravis Ace and the crop stays much cleaner to the point where in Ontario last year, there was a Miravis Ace premium on straw. Those growers that sprayed with Miravis Ace ended up picking up significant premium for their straw because it was a lot lower for dust, just much cleaner. But also our goal is to help the grower grow the best crop of grain. And this was my own crop in 19, which made milling quality. And you can see between left side, Miravis Ace treated, and right side, not treated, significant difference. My crop in 19 again made milling, and this did not. So we've got not just yield that pays the bills, but we've got to have that quality component as well to truly maximize our profit per acre. So it's not just about an untreated check, it's about some of the current products that you may be using. And Miravis Ace truly is what we call a step change. We're very, very pleased with the results that the growers have provided back to us. Plus it builds on the research data, the trialing data that we've collected. and it is a very, very positive story. So these were shots from the island, one of these shots also from the valley, but you can see again, treated and untreated, it's quite visual, it's very striking. And so these last sets of slides talk about the stack system. What we're trying to do is move growers from this low input to a full stack, and that stack really talks to the importance of keeping that canopy healthy all the way through to maximize grain fill at the back end. We're doing this with TrivaPro, as I mentioned, at T1 with Moddus, Miravis Ace at T3, and we're also encouraging growers to put additional fertilizer, particularly nitrogen. There's some synergies. Peter can talk about this. Did tremendous work. We're working in Ontario with growers there. This 1 + 1 = 3, the synergies. So we've run some trials with TrivaPro and Moddus and Miravis Ace. And if you don't put extra fertilizer on to unlock that genetic potential, I won't say you're wasting your investment, but your dollars that you're spending are not going to have the same ROI as if when we combine this with enhanced fertility. It's so critical for making this system work. I don't sell fertilizer, but I'm telling you truly, I'm begging you that this is part of the system. We have to move the needle forward on what we're prepared to put in there for fertilizer. And I know I sense and feel the resistance, because in the past, we put fertilizer dollars in, all we made it do is go down earlier. So it is about the system. These are some of the comparisons. I got the wrong name there. Sorry, Tim Ansom. Tim, I apologize if you're watching, but 2.1 on the stacked, and then 1.68 investment. Now this is compared to, and he's used some different products here as well, but gross revenue for the additional investment in particular here with the nitrogen. And you can see here, standard program already was using a T1, I'll say a T1 and a T3 spray. So Kyle on the island, same thing, TrivaPro and Moddus at T1, Miravis at T3 with 40 units of N versus, and he too had a standard with TrivaPro and Miravis Ace. So these are growers already that have sort of made that move through from a rotational crop to, let's see what we can get out of this crop. But the additional nitrogen and that Moddus, even in a hot, drier year here this past year on the island, additional $60 net per acre. This grower here on the island, the same thing. These are metric ton yields per acre. The full stack at 3.28. And I would draw your attention to the middle category. This column here is the standard that many growers were still using. 120 units of nitrogen on the winter wheat with a herbicide application, and that was it. No T1, no T3, and you can see the difference there. But I was, as they say, taking into account what would happen here if we increased on a winter wheat system with no, you'll see here, no Moddus on the far right side. But this grower didn't have any lodging as well. Topping out their nitrogen in that 140 to 150 is where this grower would be at with the additional 30 units. So it's not extreme by any means. Troy's field, this was 19. Again, the same thing, trying to move from the use of a competitor, T1 and a T3, but no growth regulator, changing to TrivaPro and Miravis Ace with Moddus. We picked up, as I say, we picked up over 0.3 metric ton and putting some dollars on the bottom line. Troy again in 2020, a little drier, yields were lower, but we are still able to, with this system, still be on the right side of the line for the grower. This one was cool. Grower actually had a yield monitor, followed all the way through. You can see some of the treatments. Excuse me. Excuse me. Full system, 40 units of N, and still additional revenue on the bottom line. Let's go. Ontario data. This was out of Staffa. It's pretty cool when you start looking at some of this imagery with NDVI. Green heads, green leaves. We see it in the, not just the fact that it's green with an NDVI imagery, but these images help the grower start visually to see what's happening in the field. So I mentioned before, it's part of the system, stand establishment, treated seed, very important. Vibrance Quattro, for example, the use of a growth regulator, when we start pushing the system, increasing fertility, Moddus, T1 spray with Trivapro, and then T3 spray with Miravis Ace. I just want to finish up though by acknowledging the growers over the last number of years that have helped us with the project. And certainly again, would like to thank Turo Agromart for their support, your support, and look forward to the discussion here with Peter. So I'll stop sharing at this point. Yeah, so we're good on time. I think, Rebecca, what we were going to do is just take again a 5-minute break. I've got 2:40.
Yeah, we're in the same time zone, so that's good.
So that's a fair bit of time still to sit and listen to Eric and sit on your butt. So Peter and I agreed we'd get switched over, and if everybody just wants to take, let's say what, you set the time, Rebecca. You're the one controlling the switch.
Yeah, would we be able to do a few of the questions that are pertaining to your presentation now, or you want to do them all? Sorry, I guess I misunderstood. I thought you wanted to do questions for your presentation after you, and then do questions for Wheat Pete at the end, or you want to hold everything till all after? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
We want to get through the material. I think it will help bring the story together, and as I said before, if you've got questions, just write them down, and we wanted to truly leave as much time for the questions at the end. I think that's where a lot of the true learning takes place, right, Peter? It really is about the discussion and the questions.
Absolutely. So Rebecca, what we thought, and it's your call certainly, but I don't know, I get tired of sitting in front of the computer screen, and a mental break for maybe 5 minutes would be worthwhile.
Yeah, sure. Yep, so it's 2:42, so let's say let's just do 2:50, if everyone can be back for 2:50, and we're going to do a hard start then.
Awesome, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, and for the people that hang around, they want to chat while in between, they can do that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
just talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, like it's kind of, oh man, this whole COVID thing, and you guys are way luckier out there than what we are here in Ontario from that standpoint. It just, man, a little bit of interaction, of actually seeing people is so nice.
Yeah, we have been pretty lucky out here. That's for sure. Can't complain in that regard.
No. Cool.
All right, we'll be back in a few minutes.
So Peter, I mentioned the other day, we've got good snow cover here on the island. We'll probably pick up another, it looks like 2 or 3 more snowfall events. So once it finally decides to quote warm up, the risk it looks like on our winter wheat is very, very low. It looked awesome in the fall. The island was probably no different than the valley. The crop there was exceptionally strong. Anybody comment about snow cover on the in the valley or in Truro or different parts of Nova Scotia? Snow cover? Oh, Alana, you're on.
Hey.
Oh, she must have her phone on or something. Excuse me. Yeah, so I'm looking out here, and then not a speck of ice. The seals, there was a seal wandering down the one of the side streets of Charlottetown the other day.
Oh, perfect. Yep.
They had to arrest him and take him back to the...
Sorry about that. We do have a bit of snow here left in Truro. So who knows if it'll stay for a bit. We could be in for an early spring, maybe. March is right around the corner.
So what do you call a bit of snow, Alana?
I don't know.
She's got the background bird.
like patchy
You can see
5
grass.
centimeters. You can
Yeah.
see grass outside.
Oh Lord, help us! We got dumped on. I think I have more snow piled up this year, and we didn't get anything basically till the 1st of February, and we've got more snow piled up than I think we have for probably 10 years. It's bizarre how much snow we've gotten here in Ontario in the month of February. So there's probably 5 feet deep in spots and where we blow in the snow into the piles. It's just crazy, and at least, I don't know, at least 18 inches or 2 feet everywhere.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, we're not that lucky. Yeah, we did have a lot here in February. We got a big snowstorm, but it's slowly starting to kind of disappear. And if we don't get any more, we might be in for a very early spring.
Yep. Well, I don't think you're as early as they are in Manitoba. I'm speaking to guys in Manitoba on Friday, and man, they really they're thinking about going to the field right now. They're so dry.
Oh, wow.
There's no snow, and they're so dry. The snow is actually starting to blow already. The soil rather is starting to blow already, and they want to get a crop growing if they can. Just really interesting.
Wow.
There's some questions there, comments in the chat box. Maybe when Rebecca comes back on, that's another way we can capture the questions, of course. And so I think I addressed a little bit on the straw, but Peter, the same thing, mentioned that if they want to drop them into the chat box there. So
yeah, absolutely. You going to answer my question, Eric?
Yeah, I wish I was, but it's not.
Yeah.
May have sounded like it. Yeah, maybe sounded.
Oh no, it's just a blue can, and I thought you gotta have a bit of fun, man. Life's too short not to have fun.
Yeah, it's hard. I wish I could zip across the bridge, but it has more impact on Cheryl than it would on me, you know. But,
no, absolutely.
Right now, so. This seems to be working. Your call the other day went pretty good, Atlanta. Did your one yesterday?
Dory, do you want to repeat that again? Rebecca just walked back in, so I was wondering if she wanted to take her screen back.
Did everything go good for you yesterday?
Yeah, we had a bit of a technical issue, but it seemed to sort itself out, and we had a nice session. So pretty happy with the turnout and the quality of the speakers yesterday. So we set ourselves up to finish strong this week with more sessions.
So I'll go on mute like everybody else, Peter, and then when we're done, I'll come back off mute, but we're getting close there, I think, to the time. So I'm gonna close it out here on my.
And I'll hand Rebecca's screen back to her.
All right. I'm just going to sneak a few little reminders in here in case there's some people just joining us for this session. I guess they might come on at 3, just the way we had the agenda going, but they can come in. We'll monitor that. But if there is anyone new right now, just a note that we do need to see your full name on the screen to record you for pesticide recertification points. If you are having trouble changing your name, if it's not already your full name, just contact one of us. You can send us a chat on here, or you can text us or whatever, just so we know that you're there and we'll get you recorded. If there's certified crop advisors here, we do have CCA points available as well. The barcode will come up at the end of the day, and you can scan that with your app for those points. If you are just looking for the pesticide points, though, you don't have to do anything except make sure we know you're here. So then the receipts will be emailed out to you within the next couple of weeks for that. The sessions are recorded, so we're hoping to send them out to all the participants next week, probably sometime, to so that you guys have it if you wanted to look back on anything. Points, of course, are only available if you're here today for the live version. So just to switch gears here a little bit, to introduce Peter Johnson, Wheat Pete. We're happy to have you here with us today, and thank you to Eric and Syngenta for helping us bring Wheat Pete to our meetings. So Pete's pretty well known. He's an agronomist for realagriculture.com, and he's retired from OMAFRA as a cereals specialist. So another wealth of knowledge to share with you guys today. So I hope everyone gets some takeaways here, and we'll reconvene afterwards, as Eric mentioned, to go through any questions that anyone has. So Pete, if you want to take it away, you can go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rebecca. And thanks everyone for having me today. It's really fun to be here. And stacked cereals. Like, how is it that I never came up with that title, man? That is such a good title. I love that title. And yeah, we're gonna see if we can't raise the bar. And I think I was here last year in the area, gave a couple of presentations. I'm going to try and stay away from some of the stuff I talked about last year and focus in on some different stuff. And at the end, we'll answer some specific things that Eric has pointed out that you'd like to have some information on. And then hopefully lots of time for questions and lots of questions. My contact information is on the screen. For goodness sakes, I live off feedback. Anybody who's worked with me knows that I just love to be challenged. So you can tweet me, you can text me, you can email me, however you'd like. I will warn you that I get lots of feedback. And so sometimes it takes me a day or two to get around to emails. It's just one of those things that is a bit of a challenge, but I will get to you, I promise. And so absolutely have at me. If you have questions that don't get answered through the session, please. One minute of shameless self-promotion. So absolutely, I work with a company called realagriculture.com. I'm independent, but I post my podcast with them. They are an incredible resource for me. They allow me to post my podcast there. Wheat Pete's Word, if you haven't heard of that, give it a listen if you can. You can get it off the website. The other thing that is ever so cool about Real Agriculture, they've been in business for a little over 10 years now. And they have a video archive, a video library of almost 1,500 short informational videos on a huge range of topics. So you want to know something about corn or soybeans or lentils or alfalfa or soil health or whatever. The video library there is just really quite incredible. So I encourage you to go there. And in particular, Wheat School. We have Wheat School, we have Corn School, we have Canola School, we have Soybean School. So we have a bunch of schools, and Syngenta is very kind to sponsor some of those schools as well. But absolutely, there's some really incredible information there if you want to dig deeper. Absolutely. Okay, enough. Let's go. So what's new? And you know, what is really cool that we barely touched the surface or scratched the surface on last year are these yield enhancement networks. So they started in the UK, and there's currently one in Prince Edward Island. You know, I didn't see Sonny on the call. Sonny Murray is your cereals guy with the Department of Agriculture, just a super guy, and he's been pushing wheat as well, and I keep pushing him to push wheat, so that's all good. But you should look at pairing up with Prince Edward Island or setting up your own yen. What's cool about a yen is that instead of Johnson telling you how to grow better wheat or barley or oat or whatever, no, it's growers, and the growers actually compete against themselves, and people like me get to watch what happens and get some measurements. And you as the grower are actually teaching us as the wheat researcher or the quote unquote expert. I hate that word, but you're teaching us. And we're the amount that they've learned. They started in the UK. I believe it's 8 years now that the wheat yen has been going in the UK. And the amount that the researchers there have learned from the farmers is absolutely phenomenal. And you kind of go, how can that be? Because like wheat is the crop. in the UK, and yet still growers are teaching the researchers so much that, or the researchers at least are learning so much from being in farmers' fields. As I said, you compete against yourself. That's one of the things I don't like about yield competitions. Man, if you have the right field and the right inputs, if you go into a yield contest and you're a poor crash cropper like I am, my dairy farmer neighbor across the road is going to kick my butt every time, because they've got rotation, they've got manure, they've got so many things that I don't have, better soil health just because of the alfalfa in the rotation. No, in this, you actually compete against yourself. And what you're doing is you're looking at, what is my maximum potential yield? And so there's some calculations that we do based on your rainfall, based on your temperatures, based on your soil depth. And you participate in this, and you might get back that you're 60% of your potential, you might be 80% of your potential, but then you can start to look at, how do I get more of that potential? And last year in the barley yen that they ran in the UK, the winning producer of the barley yen, his yield was 102% of his yield potential. And you just go, wow, like how can you get more than 100% yield potential? But that's what some of these growers are doing. They're learning, and they're actually learning from their neighbors. There's another situation where the guy that always wins the wheat yen, he won it every time he entered it for like 6 years. Last year, his neighbor won it. Why? Because he watched the guy that was winning, and he had basically the same environment and started, doing some of the things his neighbor was. Boom. He really blew it out of the water. So cool stuff. What have they learned on these yens? Well, what they've learned on these yens are, that's not wanting to work, sorry, are pay attention to detail. I can't focus you on that enough. Pay attention to detail. In the UK, they do small multiple doses, and they never want the crop to slow down. They want it flying flat out. They get it out of the ground and going, and they never want it to slow down. We aren't going to do small multiple doses in Nova Scotia or in PEI or in Ontario. Our growing season is too short. We can do some passes, but not small multiple doses. But this attention to detail, this keep the crop rocking along, I think is really important. And the other thing that just blows my mind, it is just hard to get your brain around. When they look at the difference between all these growers, 27% in the wheat yen comes down to the individual grower. In canola, it's 30%. And so what that says is you put Eric Richter on the farm beside Peter Johnson, and the final yield using the same inputs, the same nitrogen, the same variety, the same sunshine, the same water, and there can be a 27% difference in yield because Eric's a better farmer than Peter is. And I now understand why my neighbors always get better yields than I do, because they're simply better farmers than I am. But that grower impact that is beyond the weather, the grower impact actually has almost the same impact on final yield as the weather does. And we never, ever would have anticipated that. So that to me is really cool. And what it says is that you as the grower make a huge difference, that you matter, and we can all do better. So let's look at where we've gone with wheat records. So I was really fortunate from the Ontario Agricultural Conference. We interviewed Eric Watson. He's the grower on the left-hand side, and David Weath is his agronomist. And they set a new world record, actually broke his own record wheat yield in New Zealand at 7.04 tons per acre. That's 258.8 bushels per acre. Like, that is incredible. And remember, like, you guys don't have snow. Well, part of the reason you don't have snow right now, you had lots, but like PEI is an island, well, Nova Scotia happens to have the Bay of Fundy on one side and the ocean on the other. And you're like New Zealand, like the UK, you've got that maritime climate that typically gets the high temperatures to be really moderated. So these are the kind of yields that should be, you know, flying around in your brain. How can we actually get there? And if anybody has a shot at it in Canada, it's you guys way more so than it is. We have the Great Lakes in Ontario, but you guys are much more moderated than we are. And so that's neat. Then you say, what does it look like? So this is really where we start to get into some interesting stuff. So what does a 260 bushel wheat crop look like? And that's exactly what it looks like. This is a tweet from David Weath, the agronomist. And what I want you to pay attention to here is look at how uniform that crop is. And that is never what we see in Ontario. When I go to the Maritimes, I never see this uniformity. But man, to get to that level, we have to start to really focus in on getting that crop to be so much more uniform. And that's one of the things they're focused on in New Zealand. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but man, that is tabletop. And one of the best agronomists over there that in New Zealand that I talk to on a little more regular basis, he talked about if a wheat crop is any good at all, you can take an iPhone 6, and I guess that's the phone that he has, and you can set it on top of the wheat heads, and it's actually going to hold that iPhone 6 up. We used to talk about, you know, you can toss the cat into the wheat crop, and if it's any good, it can walk across the top and never fall through. It's the same kind of a thought process, but to get that kind of standability, because in a 258 bushel crop, there are 17 kilograms of grain in a square meter. And if it rains and it gets wet, it doubles. So now we got 34 kilograms of grain that crop has to hold up in the air. If it doesn't have great stock strength, it just can't do that. So really kind of cool thought process. Here's the other thing that blows my mind. Here's the same crop at harvest. And, you know, you'd look at that. And if you actually count, if you start counting the number of florets long that head is, it's not that much longer than the heads we get in Nova Scotia or in Ontario. And that surprises me. It might be 24 florets long or 25 florets long. We're typically 19 to 21. But look at the fertility in the head. Every one of those florets has 5 or 6 grains at it. We're lucky if we get 3. They've got 5 or 6 grains at every one of those florets. It's massive. And again, the uniformity, boy, you don't see any heads down here in the canopy like we get with late tiller heads. They're all up here and all fairly uniform. So cool stuff in terms of where we're going with. So what does it look like? This is the other thing that just astounds me. And we've talked about heads per square meter and trying to get more heads, but I've focused a lot more on trying to get that fertility in the head. They seed this crop at about 400,000 seeds per acre, or somewhere around 8 seeds per foot of row in 7.5-inch rows. They're actually on 6s, but that's what it works out to. And they want those seeds spaced apart. They want 10 tillers per plant. And this is really wow stuff. And you kind of go, well, wait a minute. Like Johnson has said, if you get 10 tillers per plant and you get that many heads, the wheat crop is going to flop over. And when we up our seeding rate, because Mike Solaris, he was one of the former New Zealand world record holders, and he's been competing with Eric, and Eric's been outperforming him. And he thought, well, I need more heads. I need more heads. So I'm going to up my seeding rate to try to get more heads. It failed miserably. He actually reduced his yield by seeding more to try to get more primary heads. They want 10 tillers per plant. They want those heads. They want those fall tillers. Those are the ones that really make the difference. And they're seeding at a time to make that many tillers. Now, can we ever get there in Nova Scotia? I doubt it. But this concept of more heads is really starting to intrigue me. Uniformity and more heads. And here's part of the reason why. So Agris Co-op ran a sort of a mini yen program in Ontario last year. Our own yen, we're starting up an Ontario yen. It kicks off this spring. We're going to have 20 producers, but look at the data that Agris actually put together. And this is phenomenal because the green line, or pardon me, the yellow line is yield. And there's some pretty nice yields there, right? We're closing in on 140 bushels per acre with a couple of them. And all of them are pretty much, you know, mostly over 80 or over 100. There's some here that drop down, but that's, you know, could well be their yield potential. We don't have that. But look at the correlation between heads per square foot and yield. And that correlation is really quite strong. The green line is heads per square foot. That blip up doesn't quite match, but boy, over the whole thing, those two lines really do marry up. And the other thing that really is surprising, because we talk lots of, and I'll talk in a minute about, you know, 60 to 70 heads per square foot, somewhere in that range. And when we talk about that, virtually all of these guys are getting head counts. We have head counts here that are over 100. And remember that Eric, he was at 1260 per square meter. So that's about 1,100 heads per square yard, or it's about 110 per square foot, somewhere in that 110 to 120 per square foot. So we're getting up to those same kind of head counts that Eric was having. And that all of a sudden, I'm really interested in heads per square foot because I'm learning from these yens. The other thing that blows my mind is I thought for sure nitrogen mattered. And by the way, nitrogen does matter. And if you short yourself for nitrogen, you will lose yield. There's no question. But again, what astounds me is that heads and yield are pretty correlated. Nitrogen and yield in this study is not correlated at all. And you kind of go, wow, what is going on? But it comes down to this grower probably has some manure. He's that dairy farmer. And so he didn't need as much nitrogen, whereas these growers out here, maybe they overshot their nitrogen, but what's interesting is if you look at the corn yields and you talk to the National Corn Growers Association in the US where they run these corn yields, they get yield winners on 80 pounds of nitrogen and they get contest yield winners on 300 pounds of nitrogen. And they have not been able to find this relationship in maximum yields, yield winners, contest yield winners between nitrogen and the final outcome any more than this does. And don't back away from nitrogen. We've got lots of data that says nitrogen is incredibly important, but the correlation wasn't there. And that really blows my mind. So lots of things to think about here. And hopefully I'm stimulating lots of questions because this stuff just makes my head spin. So we end up about here. Man, if we could all get to that 120 heads per square foot, we'd blow the bins apart. Hope that never actually happens to you. That's kind of a mess, but yep. So let's look at how we get there. And I want to talk briefly about tillering because we're coming into spring and we really need to start thinking about how do we manage this crop. I understand you've got a good looking crop in the field right now on your winter wheat crop at least. And so how do we manage that crop? And we talked about this before, but this whole concept of seeding date. And so this is actually a study out of Michigan State. So Kurt Steinke, Michigan State in 2013, he planted wheat on September the 17th. One of the things he did wrong in this study, in my opinion, was he planted the same population across all three planting dates. I think that's all bad. But think about this, the same population on September the 17th, he's got 4 tillers per plant plus the main head. Every plant now has 5 heads. We back off to October the 11th. He's got almost 2 tillers per plant. He's got the main head. So now he only has 3. Instead of 5 heads, he's got 3. We get to October the 28th. Now I only have 1 head per plant. And if I'm looking at heads per square foot as one of the driving factors to maximize yield, and I've got the same population here as I've got here, that doesn't work. But you can immediately say, well, wait a minute, won't that crop tiller in the spring? And you're right, the October 28th crop will tiller in the spring, but I showed you this last year. So that late planted wheat, this is a study that Shane and I have been working on, my technician. And so here's my main heads, and my main heads are 19 grams. And you look at my primary tillers, they're spring tillers, there was no fall tillers. And you'd say, well, those heads, Peter, they don't look that much worse than these main heads. But look at the fertility in the head. And when we weighed those heads, they are less than half of the yield potential that those main heads are. And if we look at the late tillers, the one that were down in the canopy, man, they're only at 5 grams. So for goodness sakes, don't tell me that you don't want tillers, because those tillers still added to yield. They made timing the fusarium spray a little tough, and they're not what we want. But we still need enough heads if we're going to get to yield. But man, in our work where we do fall tillers, these main heads on early planted wheat, they might well be 25 grams, but the primary tiller, the secondary tillers, and the third and even fourth tiller in the fall, they're going to be 23, 24, 25 grams. They're going to be in that same range when we get to that scenario. So really kind of cool stuff. So just walk you through quickly some stuff that we're working on. And this is some planting dates stuff. This was taken, I forget the day in May the 15th or something like that, May the 10th maybe, but somewhere in the early part of May. And 2 wheat fields, one at London, one at Ingersoll. They're, I don't know, 10 kilometers apart perhaps, but 2 of our trial locations. And you look at the difference in growth between the September 10th wheat, the November 10th wheat, and you say, wow, like I know which one's going to yield the most. There's just no question about which one's going to yield the most. So the next 2 slides are from these fields. So remember, the early planted on the right-hand side, the late planted on the left-hand side, and look at the difference in terms of development. This is the exact same day that these pictures were taken. Look at the root growth, look at the crown development on this early planted wheat. And you look at this wheat here, and there's enough plants there for sure, but certainly nothing like we're seeing here. You might worry a bit about early disease in this one, and that would be a watch out. I can see a little bit of septoria starting right there on that leaf, so you got to be on top of that. But man, quite a difference. And then you look at the tillering. And so Eric asked me to walk you through tillering just a little bit more in terms of management. And so counting tillers, we'll get to that in a minute, but you can see here that this early wheat, when I pull it out, like look at, that's the main stem right there. That's the coleoptile tiller right there. And I mean, the coleoptile tiller actually has its own tiller started. And so it's like, wow, the yield potential and the number of tillers per plant. This one has a strong 3. This one has 1, 2, there's one in there, 3, 4, 5 nice tillers. Over here on this late planted wheat, that plant has no tillers whatsoever. Oh, there might be one coming here. This plant has 1 tiller coming here. This plant has 2 tillers. That's a tiller and that's a tiller. And you can tell that, pull the leaf back and see if that's a stem as opposed to a leaf. So we're getting some spring tillers, but look at how weak those spring tillers are compared to those fall tillers over here. So come back to spring management. And I'm going to push you towards split nitrogen, and you can ask me more questions. I'm not going to go into detail on that. We talked about that last year when I was here, but again, 60 to 70 viable stems per square foot. And I wonder if that number's too low based on what we learned from the ECNs and from the world record wheat. But we can't, or we have to manage that lodging if we get over the 60 to 70 stems for sure. And so what that ends up being, 19.2 inches of row equals 1 square foot in 7.5 inch rows. I assume most of you will be there. That's 38 stems or 38 viable tillers per row, per foot of row. Big wheat might be 100, but how do I count these? And so we really now have to start looking at how many leaves each tiller has. And so in order to count that tiller, does it count? Doesn't it count? Well, this has 3 tillers. There's tiller 1 here, tiller 2 is here, tiller 3 is that one right here. The main stem has 5 leaves. That's a leaf, that's a leaf, 1, 2, 3 more leaves. You might not count that one depending on how you're counting, but in any case, it's got more than 3 leaves, we count it. These two tillers only have 2 leaves. If a tiller has 3 leaves, it counts as a fall tiller. It's a strong plant. It's going to have the same size head or close to it as the main head. When we get to these tillers that have 2 leaves, particularly in a later stand, then yeah, we're going to count these, but not as a full tiller because they just don't have that yield potential. That counts maybe as 3/4 of a tiller or 80% of a tiller. And so you kind of, if they have 2 leaves, you count them, but you factor them down. This tiller, you don't even probably count because it's going to be that late head down in the canopy causing you problems. And so this one, you would say probably 2.5 heads on that plant when you're doing that viable stem count. And that's going to affect our nitrogen management, all those other things. We can get into the question session later. But the other thing I want to talk about is uniformity. And this drives me nuts. Why? We are using 1950s technology to put wheat in the ground, and it's the year 2021. Like, how is it that nobody has invented a better wheat seed drill yet? Gosh, 1972, we invented the Maximerge corn planter. That's 50 years ago. And we're still using this technology in cereals. It's really quite unacceptable. But look at here, the difference between that row and this row. And by the way, uniformity, look at how that clump of seeds, these controlled spill devices, really good research out of Germany that says if your wheat plants are closer than 0.4 of a centimeter together, so 0.4 millimeters basically, that they'll never achieve maximum yield. Too much plant-to-plant competition. Well, man, you've got, I don't know, all of those plants are closer than that. And up here, we've got here's a seedling just coming up. There's a bunch that probably haven't come up. Like, from a uniformity standpoint, this is brutal. And seeding depth. I mean, here we have one that's 3/4 of an inch deep. There's one here that's actually almost on top of the ground. These are 2.5 inches deep. It's no wonder that we can't get uniformity. And what does that do? Well, it ends us up with situations like this. And whether this is because of poor residue spread, this one happens to be poor residue spread, but I see the exact same thing with all of this variability that we get out in these wheat fields. And guys in Ontario would look at that wheat field and their initial reaction would be, that's a pretty good wheat field. That is a crap wheat field because of the lack of uniformity. And these areas are never going to yield like these areas will. And it's going to be a brute to time your fungicide. We have to start doing a better job in terms of getting those plants more uniform. So the best work on that is actually by Michigan State University. And here they have planted wheat with a monosome corn planter. And man, that took them some real work. They had to make discs, they had to play around, but that's a corn planter planting wheat. And look at, number one, we're fairly uniform spacing. They don't get perfect uniform spacing yet, but the seed depth is bang on. You get a little bit of variability, but not much. And look at how uniform those plants actually are. And here's the drill, Great Plains drill, standard kind of thing. And you call that uniform? That's horrendous. And so this uniformity has been adding 10% to their final yields. When they can get these uniform stands, they've seen a 10% yield increase. So we've got a long way to go from that standpoint. So I'll take a quick break here and just, I always put these slides in for a mental break, but 10,000 years we have survived off wheat. Over 20% of the world's calories today come from that single crop. Wheat provides over 20% of the humans' world calories in the world today. And yet people tell us that wheat isn't safe, that wheat is bad for us. Give me a break. Good grief. We didn't survive off it for 10,000 years if it's bad for us. It just drives me nuts. Okay, let's carry on quickly. Corn. What's the number one factor in corn yield improvement today? What's driving corn yields higher? Mark talked about corn earlier today. Well, it's the stay green. And so can we do that with wheat? And I showed you this last year, but Eric talked about, green leaves and ripe heads. This is Ontario. This is one of our highest wheat yield growers. This wheat was 18% moisture. So we've got, you know, ripe wheat, and we've still got green leaves that are able to photosynthesize. And that's what we have to focus in on. That's what the crop looked like close to harvest, or at harvest rather, 240 bushel per acre on a calibrated yield monitor. Oh my gosh, the world record's 258, and we hit spots in the field. You can say it's a yield monitor, but man, we're pretty close. And that's because of this whole concept of green leaves all the way through grain fill. Again, I talked about that for quite a bit last year, but I just want to hit here because Eric talked about Miravis, and people ask me, is Miravis better than Prosero or Carumba? They're all excellent fusarium fungicides. They really are. The one real upside of Miravis, and you can see it over here, and this is not Syngenta data. This is Dave Hooker, University of Guelph, Ridgetown campus. Look at the NDVI, which is a measure of greenness. It's 20% higher at basically maturity. Maturity is growth stage 90. So we're essentially mature here, and we're 20%. Yeah, 20% higher in green leaves. And it made a difference in yield here. I'll tell you right now that you don't always see a yield advantage to Miravis over the other two. If it gets hot through grain fill, you know, all those other things, there's no guarantees, but I like this stay green potential. And I'm really excited some way or another about trying to capture that and make more yield. So this is Syngenta data, and they allowed me to use this data. But what I wanted to show you this for, isn't so much that, you know, we're getting the 100% win. I'm not sure you'll always get 100% win, but Eric talked about the alternaria. That's real. I don't work for Syngenta. That's real. There's no question about that. You want clean straw. The horse people now in Ontario love wheat straw that has been treated with Miravis because it is so clean. It's not dusty. The horses don't get colic from the straw. So that's a big point. But what I show you this for is these two sites down here. So those two sites were in Essex County last year. Essex County was incredibly dry, incredibly hot. We had 30 days in Essex County through our grain fill period, which is generally 35 days of grain fill. We had 30 days over 30 degrees Celsius in Essex County. And if you remember my talk from last year, that hammers yield. And we would say, wow, we shortened grain fill so much that the fusarium fungicides won't help. And you're right, they didn't help a lot, but they kept the flag leaf enough greener that we still saw that little yield bump. So that's a big deal when you're not sure if it's going to be hot and dry, that there's probably still something to that application. And if ever you get moisture, then all of a sudden you're starting to see some really nice yield advantages from that particular product. So Eric asked me to talk quickly about weed control. Man, just show you what we're seeing here in Ontario. And we're seeing more and more grass crop or grass weeds show up in our winter wheat crops. Now, if you're in spring wheat or barley or oats, if you seed early enough, you should never see foxtail. If you see foxtail in your spring cereal crop, you simply seeded too late. You seed early, they will outcompete the foxtails. But what we are starting to see more of are these bluegrasses and also the bromes, the downy bromes, the chesses, the cheat grasses. And so Eric asked me for some control, and bluegrass, in particular, annual bluegrass and rough stalk bluegrass, it's really tough. There's only one product that gives us good control. Even glyphosate doesn't do as good a job because we'll get more seedlings that actually develop. So that's focus on the brome species. So if you're getting chess, if you're getting downy brome, Simplicity Grow Dry, either in the fall or in the spring, will do a good job there. And then the foxtails on the spring cereals are either Puma Advance, Bengal, and Vigil rather are generics. Achieve and Bison are the same product, the same active ingredient, Axial, but they're all group ones. And again, just seed early on the spring cereals. You won't need the foxtail control at all. All right, next thing, Eric, just quickly touch on phosphorus, some new data here on phosphorus. And man, like this is just does broadcast give the same yield as in furrow? So this trials that Shane and I ran way back in 2011 to 2013. And at the end of the day, you know, a pound of phosphorus is a pound of phosphorus. I get asked all the time, what about liquid versus dry? This is a straight phosphorus response. If you see the phosphorus applied at 7 pounds, we got 2.6 bushels. At 13, we got 4.2. We get up here to 40 or 50, we're at 7 bushels. So that's sort of where it maxes out. And it doesn't matter liquid or dry. It just doesn't. It's a phosphorus response. Once you get up into this, you know, kind of 40, 50 range, the phosphorus response levels out. So there's no point in going to 100 because you're not going to gain more yield. But really interesting kind of data. And then you look at the broadcast. So broadcast, we're at 68 pounds of phosphorus, and we're only getting about the same yield gain as we got back here at 14 pounds of phosphorus. So seed placed is at least 4 times more efficient, more effective than broadcast. Does broadcast help? Sure it does. It's 5 bushels. But you cannot get that same level of response by broadcast. And if you take the time after, and I don't want to spend too long here, but the potash just doesn't matter. Potash just does not seem to matter to speak of, particularly in winter wheat production in Ontario. And that's kind of an interesting fact. Don't you ever say that Johnson says we don't need potash. Your corn, your soybeans, your alfalfa, your potatoes, they need potash. But wheat doesn't, and that's kind of interesting. On the nitrogen front, I got asked about nitrogen source. You know, all of these are good nitrogen sources. One of the biggest problems, and this is interesting, Eric Watson, the world record holder, urea, the cheapest nitrogen source on New Zealand because they're an island. They don't have any production capabilities. It all comes in on boat. Yep, well, look at this. This is the kind of problem they get into with their urea. It's not all the same prill size. And if you go through a spinner spreader, there's just no way that you can do an accurate job with the differences in the prill size of getting uniform application. So Eric went to 100% liquid for this season, for the 2021 season, because he was seeing streaks. He wasn't happy with his spread pattern. So a pound of nitrogen is a pound of nitrogen, but apply it uniformly. People ask about ESN. ESN is a great product. It doesn't work for wheat. Wheat's nitrogen demand is too early, and ESN just doesn't always release timed with that wheat crop's demand. So nothing wrong with it on corn, but the timing and the reliability of release and ESN, it pretty much doesn't work from that standpoint. As far as split applications go, this is out of Manitoba, but I could have shown you Ontario data. At the end of the day, the highest yield is at this stem elongation split. Put your first nitrogen on basically early and come back in at growth stage 32. 31, 32, that's when we get the highest yields, and it gives you some wiggle room as well. The problem with the flag leaf split is if you don't get rain to move that nitrogen into the soil quickly enough, then you starve the plant at heading, and that simply doesn't work. So split nitrogen, it's an insurance policy. It protects against loss. If you put it all on early and you get warm, wet weather, you'll get denitrification. And the other thing that really plays is your better knowledge. If you wait for that second application to grow stage 32, you can look at the stems, you can look at the health of the crop, you can look at the temperatures you've had and the moisture you've had up to that point, and you can do a much better job of saying, so I was going to put 30 pounds on. Oh, she's not very good. Maybe we should skip it entirely. Or, oh my gosh, this is the year. We don't need 30 pounds. We need 75 pounds more nitrogen. Let's give it. The other thing is that split nitrogen helps with his lodging. There's no question about that. And it's an environmental win as well. However, it doesn't always give you more yield. So it will always prevent lodging, but it doesn't always give you more yield. So put the 2/3 on up front, come back with 35% in your split, and you'll just really do a better job of managing your wheat crop. We did that in this particular one. We have this program going in Ontario right now where we're trying to push the boundaries. You can see the differences in the color there. We put 180 pounds of nitrogen over here. Most guys would say that's crazy too much. Probably it is, but here's 120 without a growth regulator. and we gained 12 bushels per acre. So this stacked cereal program that Eric's pushing, man, it works. It just works if you put all the pieces together. Okay, so this tillering, remember I talked about this? Yeah, well, you plant September the 17th, the same population as October the 28th. What's going to happen? Well, here's what happens. The earlier you plant winter wheat, the taller it gets, right? So here we have September 17th at 38 inches. When we get to the October 28th, we're a full foot shorter. We're a foot shorter at harvest time. And you just go, wow. So this crop, once you plant early to get that big yield potential, then all of a sudden you've got big lodging issues. And so absolutely lodging is what they saw in that early planted crop. And I don't know, they made some interesting conclusions. They just should have cut their seeding rate back, but you have to manage lodging with nitrogen timing and also with the plant growth regulator. Growth regulators work. This is old data from Shane and I. And what astounded us was that with growth regulators, because of how they work in the crop, we saw this small yield boost. It's only a couple of bushels, maybe at the most 3. But even in the absence of lodging, none of these plots lodged. It wasn't a lodging issue. We still saw that yield boost. And that was pretty surprising. So what is happening there? A plant growth regulator, you actually grow more roots. More roots generally means more yield. You also remove apical dominance for a short period. What that lets happen is the tillers catch up. So that uniformity I talked about, the way that Eric Watson gets that is with growth regulators. Put that growth regulator on there, growth stage 30 to 32. I know Eric talked about other timings. I'll push you hard to put it on at that time because that's when you get the maximum bang for the buck and it affects the tillering the most. It gives you that uniformity and you can tank mix it with your spring herbicide. Now on winter wheat, I'm talking winter wheat here. You know, typically I don't know that you need a spring herbicide, but the timing of those two does work pretty well together. May not work quite as well with your herbicide. We can talk about that in the question and answer period. Eric asked me to talk briefly about cereal leaf beetle. I'm not sure if you're having this problem and when is too late. Oh man, if you let it get to here, it's too late. And with cereal leaf beetle, scout early. There's a parasitic wasp out there that controls cereal leaf beetle. I get cereal leaf beetle on my own farm every year. I never have to spray because the parasitic wasp always keeps it under control. If I go down into the sands at Delhi, they get cereal leaf beetle. They have to spray essentially every year because the parasitic wasp can't survive in sandy soils over the winter. So you will get perennial areas that have cereal leaf beetle problems. And if you are in that area because of sand soil, then scout early and control. If you're not in that area, scout. Once in maybe 20 years, you might have to control, but generally speaking, it just won't be that big a problem. It's a real issue in terms of just your own local area. But for goodness sakes, this is too late. If you let them eat all the leaf area, it's too late. Or just like this armyworm situation, man, it's simply too late. Two last quick things, and I'm getting to the point I want to be done. I want lots of time for questions, but Eric asked me to address market class that there's been a few people question, like, how do I know, should I grow soft red, soft white, or hard red? And so from that standpoint, you know, soft red is the industry standard in this part of the world, in the eastern seaboard, if you will. So from Ontario east, it's pretty much all soft red. Why? Well, that's where the majority of the breeding effort has gone. Soft reds, they have high yield potential, no higher than soft whites. The two of those would be equal. You could argue that hard reds should be, but I'll get to that in just a second. But soft reds and soft whites should both yield the same. The challenge is that soft whites sprout. So if you aren't getting $1 a bushel premium or $36 a ton premium, don't grow a soft white. In your climate, the chances of sprouts are just too high a risk. The soft reds also are generally a little bit more fusarium tolerant. Now I have to be careful with that because there's more difference between the varieties in soft red or the varieties in soft white than there is between red and white. But in general terms, reds are a little bit more resistant or tolerant of Fusarium because the red bran actually has tannins in it that are kind of a fungicide, a natural fungicide against the Fusarium fungus. So they just tend to be a little bit better from that standpoint. So high yield potential, they don't sprout very easily. Soft reds, if all you're going for is yield, that tends to be the one you go for. Soft whites, as I said, without a buck a bushel premium, don't grow them. Hard reds, man, they make protein. And if you have a bread wheat market and they'll offer you, again, it's sort of this $1 a bushel premium. You can get that premium, you can make more money out of hard reds than you can out of soft red. But you have to be able to lock that premium in. And hard reds typically will be a little lower yielding because they make protein. And it takes more energy to make protein than it does to make starch. And starch is what gives me my yield in the soft red. So we have some very high yielding hard reds right now. There are some that are challenging the soft reds, which is really something. But as soon as you go higher protein, then it takes more nitrogen and you will probably struggle to match the very best soft red yields. Okay, last, Eric asked me to touch on harvest and should you harvest at 20%? Oh my gosh, nothing good happens to the grain once it hits 30% moisture, physiological maturity. And so this is just some data out of New Liskeard. I have data from London, Ontario as well that just mirrors this. But we have here, what's that? 9 days. They got 3 rains in 9 days. And with the amount of bird damage and maybe a few kernels dropping on the ground, it was already probably on the late side on August 28th. But they lost 5 bushels in yield. And it's not a shrink in the kernels. It's just things happen, bird damage, whatever. I expect you have some birds in Nova Scotia. You leave that out and you wait for it to hit 14% moisture instead of taking it at 18% and it keeps raining or it's too humid. You're kissing bushels goodbye. That's all there is to it. As well, your test weight will drop. That's a quality factor. It drops 1 pound per bushel for every rainstorm you get. We got 3 rainstorms. Guess what? We lost 3 pounds per bushel. And if you happen to have Fusarium, boom, the Fusarium goes up. It is incredible how quick that Fusarium can actually go up and the Dawn content in the grain. So can't push you enough to get out there. My best growers start wheat harvest at 22% moisture. I now have one grower who bought a stripper header so he can start at 26% moisture because that's when we get the highest quality grain. And quality often pays. With that, I'm done. I hope I hit the mark. I hope I didn't take too off long. And let's go to questions.
All right, thank you, Wheat Pete. Eric, I think you're going to join in too. There are a few questions that have come in, so I guess I'll just start going through those, and people can fire them off as you get more. Just send them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and just ask them directly yourself too. So the first question we have is about Moddus. Does using Moddus have any effect on straw quality and characteristics if you're feeding straw as opposed to using it for bedding?
So from a feeding perspective, no, we're A-okay there. The point we mentioned before, both Peter touched on it and I did, it's incredible. We've heard many growers talk about, from the standpoint of the straw, I sell straw, I don't want my straw being 20% or 25% less in yield. And it's interesting because it's a bit of an optical illusion. We get 1 or even 2 head length reduction in height, and there's no straw yield difference. And it's like, well, wait a minute, what the heck's going on? Visually, you see a difference, but don't forget what I said earlier is we're not only reducing the height, but we're building a bigger pipe. And so minus 1 plus 1 equals no net difference. And that's the surprising thing. In extreme cases, I don't think I'd say the exact same thing where we've got, I've seen personally 14, 16 inch reduction, and there will be a reduction there, but on average, there's no measurable difference.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. It does depend on how high you cut the straw, because if you put it on early, like we want you to put it on, so that fishing rod is, we get the thickness down at the base. That's where we've really thickened it up. And now you cut it at 10 inches height. Well, okay, you've given up some straw yield there because you've shortened it and you've left the really thick stuff that weighs more down at the bottom. But if you're after straw and you're cutting it reasonably short, we've actually seen in several trials a straw yield increase, not a decrease. We got a good yield increase. We kept it standing, and we actually got more straw per acre using a growth regulator, which again, you would not really expect, but we have seen that. As far as the feeding or the quality characteristics from a bedding standpoint, we have not seen any differences from a bedding standpoint in terms of absorbency. Sometimes it's a wee hair slower to absorb the water because of that thickness, but it still has about the same level of absorbency from that standpoint.
And as mentioned, Peter, last year was amazing. I mean, this came through from Twitter and growers back through to us, but there was a premium on Miravis straw, and it's like, whoa, that's not a Syngenta claim, but that just shows you, again, if the growers see value, those buyers were willing to pay for it. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
I think we got that one, Rebecca, and there was one there. I think there was two together about the straw question with Moddus. So thanks very much for the opportunity to explain that.
Yeah, perfect. A couple other questions on costing of Moddus per acre, as well as in comparison to other products like Ethereal and Manipulator. On the safety side of things, would Moddus be considered a safer product in that regard?
Yes, our application window is wider, and we tend to go, as I say, early. And the price point, I'll say very competitive. Suggested retail right there in the mid-teens, and we want to launch hard and aggressive into the market, and we'd like growers that are interested in trying it, that feel it has a fit, to to feel that they're getting good value for their dollar spent. So yeah, I think we're at a pretty interesting price point for a new product into the market for Syngenta. And as Peter said, it's plant growth regulators not new for many areas that are growing cereals around the world. But Peter, you know those world record holders both in New Zealand and in the UK, that doesn't happen without the plant growth regulators, right? And
you can't hold that much grain up with I mean, wheat by its very nature way back when tended to be 6 to 8 feet tall, and we're now growing semi-dwarf varieties and we've pulled them down shorter. But you get a big wheat head up there, the fishing pole just is too wobbly and she falls over. And no, if you talk to Eric Watson, he uses 2 applications full strength each time, but he's holding up 258 bushel wheat. So he's really got to have that stem strength. And I don't know, maybe growers in Nova Scotia don't mind combining wheat with the header on flex, but when that happens in Ontario, guys get really miffed with me. So the guys that I consult with, I got one hog farmer, he uses way too much hog manure, and sort of my whether I keep my job or not depends if I can keep the stupid crop standing, which with hog manure sometimes is pretty tough, but we're working at it.
Okay, the next question is directed at Pete. If we have a high head count in the spring, should we back off on our split N, like a 50-50 split, or even a 40 early and 60 later?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think you absolutely can play with that. The one thing I think the greater difference is if I have that wheat crop with lots of head count in the spring, then I don't need to rush out there and try to get on the frost or be there super early, because I've got enough heads and I can delay that first application a little bit so that I reduce the risk of maybe losing some of it in that earlier period. I don't want you waiting too long because again, the all the good growers want to keep that crop really ratcheting along. But if I plant wheat late and I don't have enough tillers there, I want you out there in the frost with that first nitrogen application. Encourage the crop to tiller, encourage the crop to try to actually, make more yield potential. With good tiller counts, could you go to a 50-50 split? Yeah, but remember, we still want to set a good head size. I don't want to see, typically I say I don't want to see less than 75 pounds. So it's kind of my range is 75 to 90 early. And it's just because we're a short enough growing season that I don't want to see too much less than 75 pounds in that first application. And don't forget the sulfur, by the way. Right? The sulfur's got to be there as well. Absolutely.
Peter, you mentioned in the other, one of your other slides, you talked about late planting and we get shorter wheat, right? Early planting.
Yep.
And tends to go a bit taller. Is there any information there as to leaf area index? So, or is it all just stem, or are we actually generating some more leaf area as well?
Yeah. So the answer is, yep, you're going to generate more leaf area. And what happens with wheat when it's late planted? So the amount of thermal time, I don't want to get too technical, but the amount of thermal time it takes for the wheat crop to grow through a growth stage actually changes based on planting date. So if I plant early, it'll take 120 growing degree days to make a leaf. If I plant late, it will only take 90 growing degree days to make a leaf. And that's why when you plant early versus late in the fall, they head out fairly close together. And you say, well, how can that be? Why does it come together? It's because the plant adapts. But if you have 120 days of thermal time to build that leaf, you build bigger leaves. And so absolutely, you're building more photosynthetic area. You're building a higher green area index is one of the things we talk about in terms of canopy management. And so, yeah, you get bigger leaves. That's just one of those facts out of having that wheat planted earlier. Taller, bigger leaves, more photosynthetic area.
Sorry, Rebecca. That's it. I won't ask anymore.
No, sorry. I don't mean to get too technical, but it's really cool, eh? Like you think corn does a bit the same thing, right? Like it will, depending on planting date, it will adapt as well. So crops have that capability, but we don't really think about that in winter wheat. And yet I'll plant my first plot on September the 15th, and I'll plant my last plot on November the 15th. That's a 60-day difference. How can it be that I only see 5 or 7 days difference at heading time in those two crops with a 60-day difference in planting date? But that's because it comes together. So.
Okay, I saw Duncan had his hand up and he just sent a message. So he's just asking for clarification on whether sulfur should be in both applications or just the early.
Yeah, so great question. Sulfur is not, well, I should be careful. Just the way things work, we don't lose sulfur when we apply it in the soil. We lose nitrogen, it denitrifies. Sulfur, it's not that can't happen with sulfur, but it doesn't happen till all the nitrogen is gone. So in our trials, we would say sulfur in the first application. Don't, if you want to put it in both, that's fine. If you're putting on 28% and it's a blended product with 28% and sulfur and you're using that both applications, that's fine. But don't miss the sulfur in the first application because wheat has a high sulfur demand early in the growing season. And if you short it on sulfur early, then you're going to hurt your yield. So you can do it in both, but it's really the first application that is critical. The other interesting thing is that on really high yield wheat, we've cleaned up the amount of sulfur we're getting out of dry deposition, out of the acid rain, if you will, out of air pollution, so much that in 2010 to 2012, Shane and I did a bunch of sulfur work and we thought 10 pounds was enough, 10 pounds of sulfur per acre. Now, with our really high yield wheat fields where we're pushing, 130, at least 120 bushels per acre, 130, 150. I know you guys are tons per acre, but yeah, my brain isn't going to do that math that quickly. But, we're getting up to really high wheat yields, kind of pushing 3.5, maybe 4 tons, somewhere in that range per acre. Then we need 20 pounds of sulfur, and we even have some growers that are going 25 or 30 pounds of sulfur. I doubt we need that much, but it does take more sulfur for those really big wheat crops.
Pete or Eric, have either of you seen any work done with humates on wheat? We've been dealing more and more with them and people asking about them, and just wondering if there's any trial research work being done in that area and in Ontario.
So absolutely, we've done trials on different carbon style products, humates, humic acids, fulvic acids. I think this is the third time in my career that we've worked on them. And so you're adding carbon, right? And is carbon a good thing to add to the soil? Absolutely. The problem is that if you look at the amount of carbon you're adding, remember that organic matter is carbon. So organic matter is 58% carbon. And so you kind of go, okay, so let's say 60% for easy math. If I'm 4% organic matter, that would be 2.5% carbon. There's 2 million pounds in an acre furrow slice. So 2 million pounds times 2.5%. I don't know what that works out to, but it's a lot. Okay, I'd have to think about that for a minute. My mental math isn't quite that good. And now I'm going to go out there with these carbon products, and I'm going to put on 1 liter or 2 liters per acre. So I'm putting on, I don't know, 5 pounds per acre versus what is already out there in organic matter. Is it a good thing? Yes, it is. Can it help? Maybe, but I don't think we're maybe at the level we need to be in our research so far. We've seen the odd site we get some yield increase. We do, so it can happen. Do the plots, but consistent yield increases have been hard to come by. Somewhere there's got to be products that are going to blow the doors off. Some biologicals have to work, but the humates and adding carbon, it's always good. I'm just not sure it's enough to make a big difference.
So Rebecca, I'd deflect the question and move to fertility in general. I'm not talking biologicals here, but I'd talk fertility in general. Peter's touched on, phosphorus or potassium. We talked about nitrogen, talked about sulfur. So we got 4 of the big ones. Peter, I'm not sure if you're sort of familiar with soil types here in the Maritimes, but what, in your opinion, would be the watch outs on the micro for our cereal crops? Start with wheat, but as I say, we're looking at trying to enhance the whole system, and I've tried to make it fairly clear. Look, I don't sell fertilizer, but to get your maximum return, we have to optimize our fertility program. So talk with the group a little bit about micros, because that, to me, it just always seems to get missed a bit.
Yeah, and micronutrients are one of those things that you just got to stay on top of. And what's funny about micronutrients is that if you're not deficient, then applications generally don't add a lot. But if you go deficient and you don't correct that deficiency almost immediately, then yield losses. I've seen, we were about 2 weeks late solving a manganese deficiency on a particular plot, and we left a strip, and we just happened to have an area of the field that didn't go manganese deficient, and it's not a perfect plot, but being that 2 weeks late cost us about 20 bushels per acre in yield. And so once you see that deficiency, it's huge. If you have high pH soils, I think you're in mostly low pH soils out there, but if you have high pH soils, manganese gets to be not very available. And so manganese would be one that I'd absolutely worry about from a micronutrient standpoint. Magnesium, if you're less than 100 parts per million for magnesium, certainly if you're less than 50 parts per million for magnesium, or if your potash, if there's more potash in the soil, parts per million than there is magnesium. That's another thing to look at just as a kind of a guideline. But in particular, you get low magnesium numbers. We certainly can see magnesium deficiency. They do see zinc deficiency in wheat in Australia. I've never seen zinc deficiency in wheat here in Canada. They get copper in Alberta, but I doubt you have copper. The two that really would be magnesium and manganese. And of course, magnesium is secondary, but regardless, those would be the ones that aren't macronutrients that I think you have to pay attention to.
Yep, thank you.
So further to that, we have a question on the micronutrients, and are they as critical if you're applying regular manure, enrich or wood ash applications?
Yeah, and so the answer is any of those are going to bring micronutrients to the field. And typically, and it gets kind of funny because it's not 100% true, but the higher the organic matter level you have, the less likely you are to get a micronutrient deficiency until you get to the muck soils. And so as long as you're on a mineral soil, high organic matter, less likely to have that problem. Get to a muck soil and you can have 14 or 18 or 20% organic matter, and you will have micronutrient deficiencies out the yin yang because there's so much organic matter that it's now actually tying up the micronutrients faster than the bugs in the soil can release them out of the organic matter. So you do kind of trip over that cliff. But typically when you're looking at, like, I love manure, it's becoming more and more evident, and we don't understand why, but you get better response out of the nutrients in manure than you do from commercial fertilizer. And I shouldn't say that with talking at Truro Agrimart, because they sell fertilizer, and I'm not trying, like, I'm a big believer in medium soil tests, and I didn't even mention that in the presentation, but man, you have to maintain those medium soil tests. You really do. But when we apply manure and we think, oh gosh, we applied whatever, so many pounds of phosphorus, mostly the crop acts like it's more than that amount of phosphorus. And maybe that's because of the added well, actually, I think for sure it's because of the added biological activity that manure brings. Wood ash, be a little more careful, because wood ash is not very available. It's going to tie nitrogen up because of the high carbon level in it. And it depends on which Enviro product you're talking about. There's many of the different ones out there, but typically Enviro is a very good product from that standpoint. So, yeah.
Okay. Eric, was there anything else on your end that we had talked about before the presentation that we didn't touch on, do you think?
No, I forwarded those through. Peter, I think you nailed pretty well everything. You know, we didn't venture into hard on corn or soybeans, Rebecca. There were some questions or thoughts, but I figured we'd do a pretty good job of 2 hours on cereals. But I'm starting to think we missed the mark entirely, because there's hardly any questions. Like, dang, that doesn't work.
No, you covered a lot of ground for sure. Is there anyone else out there that has any further questions for Pete or Eric while we have them here?
Yeah, Peter, I'll ask you a question. Managing wheat in the spring, where you're looking at two different fields. If I got one, I planted 1.8 million seeds last fall, say 40, I guess that'd be stems per foot or row. And I got a lot of tillers last fall. We had a really open fall, beautiful weather. I don't know where it is now. If I assess in the spring, if I got one field in the spring that, if I got one tiller on those plants, and if they all survived, I could be 80 stems per foot or row right now. On some late planted wheat, I could have down to, maybe in that 40 range of wheat. How would you manage those two fields differently? And what would you do, I guess, if you have a real good stand on one field and the other one, it's just okay?
Yeah, and great question, Niels. And absolutely, if you manage those two fields the same, you are going to be a very unhappy camper at the outcome. Either one's going to go flat or the other one's going to have no yield. So the late planted field, it's the earliest possible nitrogen, and you probably don't worry about lodging, because unless it's really powerful ground, you simply, late planted wheat, as I said, is shorter. The lodging potential goes down. So you split your nitrogen. You split your nitrogen not because you're you're trying to manage lodging, you split your nitrogen because you're trying to stimulate those spring tillers, hold every fall tiller that you happen to get. And so that early nitrogen, and I probably on the poor field, I cut back my nitrogen, right? So when I say cut back, I'm not talking about 80 pounds. I'm saying I cut back to 120 pounds or 135 pounds. Our data is really clear. The optimum nitrogen rate on most wheat fields that would be planted after soybeans or after silage corn, or, you know, like kind of a typical rotation, not after peas or alfalfa, but a typical rotation, you're between 120 and 150. And so even on those late planted fields, don't drop it below 120. On the good wheat field, now I'm looking at growth regulator. Do I need it? And if you're at 90 stems, boy, I'm really starting to think I better be looking at a growth regulator here. And now I'm looking at, let's get 75, 80, 90 pounds of nitrogen out there, late April, early May, after, you know, when it's greened up, but not, don't let it go long after green up, kind of in that green up time frame. And then see what the weather's like. And man, that's the field that my second application, I get to grow stage 32, and I'm thinking, do I put another 90 pounds on? I got 90 on. Do I go to 180? Do I at least go to 160? Or has it been so hot that we've dropped a bunch of tillers and I'm going to cut back? But on that good field, I'm almost for sure going to push 150. Our data would say that 60%, well, 59, but say 60% of the time, the most economical rate of nitrogen is 150. And 38% of the time, it was 120. So on a good wheat field, I'm going to push my nitrogen. I'm going to keep my sulfur rate up, and I'm going to try to manage my lodging, right? So I think you absolutely manage them differently.
Peter, would it be fair to say also on that high yield field, that'd be the one you'd queue up for a TrivaPro T1 spray, and the other one that may not have as dense a canopy, you know, the T1 may still have an ROI, but it's not as critical. The other one is a must. What are your thoughts?
No, and Eric, 100% good point, and I should have mentioned that. Like on the good wheat field, I'm far more likely to use 2 fungicides. You might need 3, and particularly in your maritime climate, you know, you get lots of foggy days and the temperatures are around 20 Celsius. That's really disease weather, right? When you get those nights that are 10-ish and the days that are 20 to 25, it's mostly when we get the most disease. So might you need 3 fungicides? Maybe. I push towards only 2, and most of it is just from a disease resistance management and being environmentally sustainable. But on the early crop, 2 fungicides almost for sure pay. And so I'm a T1.5, Eric. I'm going to take you from your T1 and push you to T1.5, that growth stage 32. That's where I'm going to do my first fungicide and my T3 fungicide. My late crop, I'm going to watch, because that late crop, if we get rust, the late crop is actually at far higher risk than the early crop, because the rust, you know, it'll hit both crops the same day. And my late crop is 5 days later in maturity, much bigger impact. But if we don't get rust and the thinner canopy, I don't get much disease, I might only do a T3. I'm going to do a T3 on both. I'm doing a fusarium fungicide on both, man. If you don't use a fusarium fungicide, you're not a real wheat grower. Don't call me. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Okay. And you can laugh or whatever, but I'm pretty serious about that. Ontario's the same. The Maritimes, the fusarium risk is too high. You just can't take the risk. But on that late planted crop, yeah, I think you might only need the T3. You may not need an earlier fungicide at all. And sorry, Eric, if I hurt your TrivaPro sales, but that's the reality.
But remember, the T3 spray is not just a fusarium spray. Remember, you know, we've got 70% coming from flag leaf in the head. Green heads, you know, green heads and green leaves. We need that. So I support you on the T3, and it needs to be beyond a fusarium discussion, in my opinion, Peter.
No, and that's fair enough. In actual fact, very little of the yield increase you get out of a T3 application comes from fusarium control. It all comes from septoria control and tan spot control and the other diseases, rust control. It's bizarre. Fusarium, rare, it can, but it has to be extremely severe before it hurts yield very much, which is kind of surprising. But
we've had those here.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know, 2010 on the island. I don't know if it was as severe in Nova Scotia, but it was horrendous. The fusarium pressure and impact on yield and profitability. There was wheat just hauled to the guys that normally burn straw. They were burning wheat. They just couldn't do anything with it. It was
no,
great.
it can. 1996, we had fields that we lost over 50% in yield to fusarium. But most years, fusarium is not the big yield robber. It's other things. But you're right, it's leaf disease. So yeah.
Thanks, Niels. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, Niels, for the question. Did that?
I have another one, if we're all right with that.
Yeah, sure.
Peter, we talked last spring. We met there. We were talking a lot about strip tilling at the time. We ended up getting a strip tiller. When's the best time you'd strip after wheat comes off? I know there's been a lot of discussion about it. I see you a couple of the videos you've done and stuff about it, and a lot of discussion. You've done a lot of work with it. So I'm asking you, after wheat, when would you strip till? Directly after the crop comes off, get a cover crop established? I don't do red clover normally. I probably should, but I'm just really scared about harvest problems with red clover. I think we get a lot of rain here in Nova Scotia, so I'm not sure about doing red clover and then strip tilling into that, or oak cover crop. I want to get the cover crop on. How can you just make some comments, I guess, on how you would make that work?
Yeah, and so if you're not into red clover, I think that you've got a couple of opportunities, right, Niels? The one thing that doesn't work too well is if you get really big oats. So you plant your oats after the wheat comes off, and you get that open fall like you talked about, and the oats go to head, like they're coming in head, and you go try to strip till that, it doesn't work. So you have two options. One is do it right after wheat harvest. It's a really nice time to do it. You can put the fertilizer in the ground, right? If you're pulling a tank behind it, I'm quite sure that Rebecca and Alana are all going to be happy with you, because they're doing nothing and they're looking for something to do right then. They'll probably even give you a discount on the fertilizer because it's that time of year. You're welcome, Rebecca. Anyway, so the soil's dry, and then you could, plant your cover crop first and strip till through it right after planting, or let it come up a little and kill it in the strip, or however, but do it right after wheat. Or the other option is let the oats grow up and let them get up a foot high and then go through and strip till. Or the last option is you spray them once they get to 18 inches but you can't let them get much more than 18 inches. And then once they start to die down, then you go in and strip till them. The problem with the last scenario is that it can get late into the fall. And if it's a wet fall, now I'm trying to strip till into less than ideal conditions. And so my first choice is strip till it sometime in August. Get your cover crop growing, strip till it in August. If you want the oats to grow in the strip, then seed the oats and then strip till immediately, and you'll make hurt a few seeds, but you're still going to get the oats growing in the strip. And that's probably the best time.
All right, we have one final question, and we're just a little bit over time, so I want to respect everyone's time this afternoon. Wondering if Wheat Peak could briefly repeat your comments on seeding density, where a lot of seed companies promote high planting densities to reduce tillering. If you could briefly go over that. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And so the worst thing you can do, like the one thing that I did not do well early in my career, and it's bad on me, but we didn't tie our seeding rates to our seeding date well enough. And if you think about what I talked about with Eric Watson, 10 tillers per plant, Niels talked about an open fall and, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 tillers per plant. Well, man, if you have a high seeding rate and you get 4 tillers per plant, then you get so much plant to plant competition. All you do is create lodging. So you absolutely must marry planting rate or seeding rate to seeding date. And if you're seeding early, go at 1 to 1.2 million. I saw some data from Michigan State today, and they're exactly the same as we are. When they're early, they're talking around 1 million seeds per acre. And if we get late, then yep, 2 million seeds per acre. But this concept that keep my seeding rate at 2 million seeds per acre because tillers are bad. Well, you know what? If I seed early and I seed 2 million seeds per acre, the wheat crop is still going to tiller. Like, it doesn't stop it from tillering. And now I have nothing but lodging problems, more disease problems, and I don't have any more yield. So that's sort of the range, unless you're on heavy clay, is kind of in that 1 to 2 million. And I'm talking winter wheat, of course. Spring wheat's similar. Barley and oats a little bit lower numbers. But if you're early, cut it back. If you're in the sweet spot, it's around 1.5 million. And if you're late, go up to 2 million. And how you determine those ranges, you know, we can talk about that. But that's sort of where we're at.
All right, perfect. And with that, I hate to cut off good conversation, but we have reached our time. So just want to, again, extend our thanks from the AgriMart to Eric and Pete for joining us today, and for Syngenta for sponsoring our sessions this afternoon. There's a lot of information, so hopefully people got a few takeaways from that. And as I mentioned in our earlier session, instead of shipping off little trinkets as a thank you, we've decided to make a donation in both of your names to the Nova Scotia Mental Health Initiative for Farmers, which is We Talk, We Grow. So we'll be making those donations to thank you guys both for your time this afternoon. One final thing is I'm just going to throw up the CCA barcode. If there are any CCAs on here and want to get some CEU points, you can just scan this code. Hopefully everyone can see that. You guys see it? Screen sharing.
Oh,
okay.
There it is.
Perfect. So other than that, we've got everyone recorded for the pesticide points as well. And once again, just a big thank you to Eric and Pete for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. And whatever you do, grow great wheat.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks to all the Truro AgriMart staff. And it's been a blast. Appreciate all the growers on the call. And certainly between the two of us and the three of us, so to speak, if you got any other questions, fire them through and we'd be glad to help you out. So
absolutely.
All the best.
Yeah, perfect. If anyone does have any questions that we didn't get to, you can fire them off to Eric or Peter or to one of us at the AgriMart, and we can definitely get them answered for you. So thanks again.
Take care.